All right, it's 7 o'clock. I will call to order this meeting of the Committee of the Whole of the Champaign, or the Urbana City Council. Could I have a roll call, please?
Ms. Wu,
Here.
Mr. Evans,
Here.
Ms. Hersey,
Here.
Ms. Colacetti. Here. Ms. Bishop,
Here.
Ms. Wilkin,
Here.
Mr. Quisenberry,
Here.
Mayor Marlin.
Here.
Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First order of business on our agenda is approval of the minutes of the previous meeting from June 6th, 2022.
So moved.
Thank you. Motion from Mary Alice.
A second.
A second from Jaya. Any discussion or corrections? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Minutes are passed unanimously. Are there any additions to the agenda? I'm not aware of any. So we can move along to public input and presentations, and the only thing under that is public input. I would ask individuals of the public who wish to address the Urbana City Council, please approach the microphone and state your name and tell us what you want to say. Not all at once.
My name is Paul Muth. I'm at 207 West Illinois in Urbana. These are traumatizing days for all of us, and I regret that I'm here feeling quite alienated from this decision. I don't support the expanding of the pod at all. I think that building programs and not expanding jails is important. I know that it's going to go ahead, but I think you have the possibility of some stipulations, and I think you should at least stipulate that the 5 million of the 20 million that is for COVID relief should be tagged in some way so that it actually is going to the health facility and the space that they're supposed to be having because of the problem of transmission, which isn't going away anytime soon, it seems. I'm not worried about airborne, by the way. I'm just don't want to rub my eyes when things are so shocking. I can't believe my eyes. I rub my eyes a lot, and I don't want to rub my eyes. So, I don't know. I don't want to get it. So, that stipulation of the use of the COVID money, you could actually say, well, how much are you increasing the public health district's finances? I know they're adding some, but I don't think I think 5 million will go way beyond what the health facility and the extra space would be. So I think that you should ask them how our tax money, my tax money to the county, is being spent on the public health district. So I know you're looking over somebody's shoulder, but I think that's what you're paid to do to some extent. My view was that the report that was issued, that was done by the consultant whose name I'm not remembering, hasn't really been implemented very fully. I don't know if the people have gone back and seen that stuff. Regrettably, the guy passed, or he would probably have been here talking about how pre-trial services and those kind of things can cut the number of people that are needing to be incarcerated. It seems to me that Brookings ought to be repurposed to be a workplace training school, and that some of these people who are in the position of not being able to go to bail or get out for whatever reasons can be in some kind of program that will give them some hope some prospects perhaps. Maybe not, but at least it would be something to repurpose that Brookins Center for and be a low-security school. That was sort of my vision for a long time, and I've spoken of it in various public circumstances, but I understand, well, I don't know what the clock, there's no clock readout like there used to be. Where is it? Oh, okay. Well, I guess I'll riff a little while. I had some notes. I'm sure Chris can tell you about the eminent scholar who gave the report that I was referring to. So I think the Japanese expression, you know, everything, if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. I think that's loosely what it means, but jails are not the solution. It's a much broader problem that we have in this culture that demeans people and kind of sometimes some of them explode. You know, I feel like I might every now and then. I guess I control it. All right, well, I don't need the other 2 minutes. I guess I'll suspend here, and I'll probably review this or try to get online and watch this, because I had my say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Paul DeBevick. I live at 708 West California. I'm going to read this to be efficient. Illinois statutes place the responsibility for a jail with the county. The County Jail Act states there shall be kept and maintained in good and sufficient condition and repair one or more jail facilities for the use of each county within the state. The inadequacy of the Champaign County Jail is beyond argument. As early as May 2011, the National Institute of Corrections found the conditions in the downtown jail deplorable. It recommended its closure. And it recommended expansion of the satellite jail. The downtown jail was closed this spring, just 11 years after the NIC recommendation. The Illinois Institute for Law and Policy report of September 2013 detailed numerous inadequacies of the satellite facility and recommended that the facility be improved. Construction cost estimates from Reefstock Farm Ride, the architectural firm, in 2015 were $32 million, and in 2019, $47 million. Now, regardless of the details of these proposals, it is certain that with delay, costs only rise. Champaign County will spend over $2 million in this year to house inmates in other counties, and a similar expenditure is expected next year. The county board, through its Jail Facilities Committee, has worked for the better part of a year to devise an appropriate proposal. The county board is now poised to act on a $20 million proposal, and it has submitted a request for a special use permit. This is the ordinance before you this evening, to expand the facility as the county jail is in Urbana. The special use permit proposal was presented to the Urbana Plan Commission on June 9th. The Plan Commission voted unanimously for the special use permit. There was, in fact, no public input, and there were no letters from the public. The minutes of the meeting report that the Park District, which has at times used some part of the land on which the expansion would be constructed, was asked for input, and it made no comment on the special use permit. I am thankful that the county board will finally act. There is a real possibility of a lawsuit and a consent decree, or a lawsuit for a wrongful death. Both of these litigations could be very costly. The county board is our elected body responsible for a county jail, and I should hope that its deliberations will be respected. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Would anyone else like to address us? Thank you. Please state your name, and you have 5 minutes.
Good evening. I'm Dustin Harmon. I'm the Champaign County Sheriff. So I wanted to provide you a little bit of context for your decision tonight and your discussion tonight. And I did write some notes also to be as efficient as possible. So just giving you a little bit of information, today my jail population is 304, including 156 at the satellite jail, 7 still housed downtown, which we hope to relocate this week, and 141 inmates housed out of county. In 2021, for a little bit of context, in 2021, the average daily population was 213, compared to 2013, where the average daily population was 243. We work very closely with the state's attorney's office to continuously evaluate who's in custody and the charges they're accused of committing, and with the local departments to issue notices to appear where appropriate. I have, as sheriff, have the legal obligation to accept inmates remanded to my custody, and an ethical and moral obligation to tend to their health, safety, and security to the best of my means. Over a decade of public input was used to form a plan approved by the county board for consolidation. This consolidation plan will allow us to permanently close the downtown jail and consolidate into one facility. Go from 295 total beds to 216 standard compliance beds, and provide more individual housing for special management inmates, including those with excessive aggression, mental health issues, and medical issues, providing better for their needs than we currently can. These are inmates that are remanded into my custody, and I do not have a say whether they're there or not. The downtown jail needs to close. I have not met a single person in the last 3.5 years that does not agree with that statement. It's the going forward part that's always controversial. Housing out of county long-term doesn't make sense from a fiscal standpoint and only places inmates further away from the positive support systems and attorneys working on their behalf. As I said in my letter to all of you, regardless of how you might feel about who should be in jail, we have a responsibility to adequately care for those inmates who are in jail while we continue to work on more comprehensive solutions to our criminal justice system challenges. The Jail Consolidation Project will help us do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Please state your name, and you have 5 minutes.
Hi, I'm Darlene Kleppel. I'm the Champaign County Executive, and I would also like to say that I'm a longtime resident of Urbana. I've been part of the conversations to discuss the jail for many years. I helped to write some of the initial studies that were done and the research that was done by the board on the Community Justice Task Force. I was involved with criminal justice parts of what was going on in our city and county for many years as the director of the Youth Assessment Center, helped to get that started for our youth, trying to keep them out of the justice system, those kind of things. My background is social work, but I also have a lot of experience with designing prisons and jails to make them better places. I worked for an architecture firm that did that for a couple of years. So I would like to just say that while it would be wonderful if we didn't have to have jails, we do have a population that requires that we do house people safely and securely and for temporary periods of time, hopefully, so that they are not a danger to the rest of us in society. And unfortunately, we've had quite an increase in gun violence lately, as you all are quite aware, I'm sure. In addition, the sheriff has had a staffing shortage, just as I know Urbana has had for law enforcement officers and patrol officers, which is making it more and more difficult to maintain 2 facilities. The county is at a crisis point right now. It also is at a point where we can use some of the ARPA money to pay for parts of what we need at the jail. And so we're hoping to leverage that by being able to fund what we think we will need. We have tried to listen to the community input in a variety of ways, including the size, not overbuilding, those kind of things. But I will tell you that we have some concern that we might actually need more space than we're proposing building, that we still might have to house some people out of county. Hopefully that's not the case, but we can't predict. So because we can't do predictions, we have to plan as best we can for what we know to be true. And so we have to move forward. We can no longer house people in the downtown facility. It is an unsafe facility at this point to keep very many people in, and the staffing has become impossible. So the county does have to make a decision, and we have to either invest in this proposal that is before you tonight, or we're going to have to invest in the downtown facility, which means we will still have two facilities, but we will do a lot of construction there, and it will be there for a very long time. So those are our choices at present, because we can't continue to deal with as many people out of county as we have right now. We can do that as a temporary solution, but not as a permanent solution. So I just put that before you and let you know those are the county's choices at present, and I'm hoping that you will approve our request tonight for the special use permit. The jail is in a location where the jail has always been. There is space to expand, and I will say it's not an expansion. It's an addition to an existing building, but it is actually a consolidation of two facilities into a more efficient, actually smaller facility than if you put both of them together. I would also like to speak briefly about community economic development, because I am a member of the community here, and I know we've been trying to develop downtown Urbana for quite some time. I've heard Mr. Evans speak about economic development and the county's investment in that. As you may know, we have purchased the County Plaza building, and we will be moving the sheriff's office into that building, which vacates the other half of the building that's currently the jail. So that is the sheriff's office and the jail facility, and we have tried to come up with a plan for both that will not only solve our problems, but help downtown Urbana as well. So I just put that before you, and thank you for letting me talk tonight.
Thank you. Please state your name, and you have 5 minutes.
All right, so my name is Stephanie Furtado. I don't actually live in Urbana, so please don't hold that against me. I live over in Champaign. I wanted to speak to you on 305 West Columbia. I wanted to speak to you today because I'm the finance chair of the county board. And I know some of you quite well, and I think that you know that when it comes to things on the county board, I take it very seriously. I take a long time studying an issue before I come to an opinion. And so for me, I've been on the county board for 5 years. In June 2017, I was put on the board. And that October, on Halloween, I visited the downtown jail. And I went on a tour of it, and I don't think I slept well for the next week. It's quite frankly an immoral facility. It's a facility that the idea that it's been allowed to get as bad as it has gotten, for as long as it has gotten, in my opinion, is a shame on the county. It's not tenable. So based on that, I spent a long time reading the studies that Paul, the second Paul, talked about. In the 2013 study for the Institute in Law and Policy Planning, which is a study that is cited often by people who don't support expanding the satellite jail. In that study, it said, in spite of its shortcomings, the satellite jail is suitable for expansion to accommodating staffing and housing needs and is more modern and better designed than the downtown jail, and that, quote, in order to transition inmates to the satellite jail, the facility must add segregation capacity, special needs housing, and the capability to handle mental health and dangerous offenders. The county cannot neglect the care and maintenance of this building. That was 9 years ago. I want to correct one thing. I do think Ron came to some of the public meetings. We held because this was such a serious issue, we formed a special committee. I assumed there was going to be dozens of people attending these meetings. I know that people tried to turn people out because I've cared about this issue long before I got on the county board. So I'm on some of the community listservs, and I got emailed asking me to come talk at the meeting, right, for the county board. So I know that it was out in the public. There was multiple news stories about it. Quite frankly, not very many people showed up, and I was surprised. But the last thing I wanted to talk to you about is the financial side of it. I know a lot of people have made a big deal that we're putting $5 million in ARPA to the jail. I want to be clear, that was a decision made for the best financial future of the county. It is not as if we can only do this project with ARPA money. We could bond the entire thing out, and that would be fine. The reason that we're putting some ARPA money to it is because we want to be able to invest in the kind of programs that people have been talking about here, like pretrial services. If we build out the entire expansion of the jail through bonding, that means that our public safety sales tax, quite simply, would all have to go to paying off that bond. And in the future, we would not have any capacity in order to do the kind of programmatic things like, and I completely agree, we need to be doing more on pretrial services. I will be blunt, if we have to continue to house people outside of Champaign County, there will be no money for those kind of programs. If we have to put it all on a bond, there will be no money for those programs. The reason that I worked hard to structure the finances the way that I did is so that we would have a pool of money for the next decade to invest in the kind of programs that I care about too, right? So I just wanted to share that. I never really thought, to be blunt, that I'd be up here speaking on behalf of spending money on a jail. But we have a moral obligation to house people in conditions that are safe, to send the people that work for us in conditions that are safe. And right now, we're not. And I think that this is the best plan forward in order to get us there. Thanks.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to address the Urbana City Council?
Alan Max Axelrod. I'm a resident of Urbana in Ward 3. So it was mentioned, for example, that there weren't a lot of people at these meetings involving the jail and all of that. That is in part because this was decided in 2019. As an intern in the Cunningham Township, I was waved into Kyle Patterson's office, where he talked to me about specifically having fewer beds in the jail as a way of getting around build programs, not jails, criticism, where he even drew an X through one of the wings. I have no idea if the floor plan resembles that. I assembled a very new group at that time of folks who would run for county board to oppose that plan. It was dismantled through information leaks, through people who said that they were allies, instead replacing them with yes votes for the jail. So, that is why some people did not show up to those meetings. Because that was part of the plan. That was how Kyle intended to be the county board exec. That was why I had a meeting with Carol Ammons' office, where for reasons that I was totally unqualified for, I was offered a job and said no, I'd volunteer instead. That being said, regarding this whole thing, your hands are mostly tied. I'd be very surprised if you vote no. I'd be a little relieved at the backbone, but I'd be very surprised if you vote no. That's just me being honest here. I had sent text messages about this $20 million plan in 2019. I tried. I trusted the wrong people. We know better now. That being said, further, I had talked to the city council last about my former neighbor who is still homeless. Let's talk about that jail population for just a second. Over the last month, her oldest son got arrested. He's being tried as an adult. Her oldest daughter's boyfriend got arrested. He was trying to get a job at McDonald's. Her youngest son got arrested. All in different weeks. You want to know why that jail population's high? We don't have an eviction moratorium anymore. There's been over 70,000 utility shutoffs just in the last month. And when the parents don't earn enough money, the kids can't work. They take sub-minimum jobs where they risk their lives and get killed. Because just like people can so readily intuit about mafioso movies from the 1920s, how it's a business, that's exactly how these kids talk about it. So if you want to lower that jail population, increase the affordability of our transportation system, have more I-stops in high-need communities, have better service for those routes, have programs to bolster the housing security of students who are struggling, because that's often related, is that if they are struggling in school, it usually has to do with financial issues, which usually leads to a higher propensity of engaging in illegal activity to survive. If Mayor Deb over in Champaign is receptive to that, and you all are not, given the reputation that a lot of people talk about in this community, that'd be quite shocking. That all being said, I can't speak to the motivations of the people that I mentioned or that I alluded to. I'm not going to. It's just what happened. Have a good night.
Thank you. Please state your name, and you have 5 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Jim McGuire. I'm also a county board member. Here to ask for your support of the special use permit. I've actually been on the county board for the last 10 years. So many of the things Stephanie talked about, we have been discussing for that amount of time. I'm actually have been the chair and the vice chair of Justice and Social Services, the county liaison for the county reentry program, liaison for past chair, a member of the RPC Community Action Board, serving many of the groups, including the Youth Assessment Center, that were the programs that the person just listed. Well, we've been trying to be diligent in making sure that people are served for those programs in the county, and there's a lot more being spent on ARPA than there is on the jail, ARPA for those programs than there are in the jail. But I have a couple concerns. Both is the fact that the jail itself downtown is considered uninhabitable by REFSAC. Also, our staff and the security of the people there in the jail and the staff. We're having a crazy time trying to retain corrections officers. They're overworked. They work many hours of overtime, and obviously, you know, it's a 24/7 facility. My biggest concern would be, as the sheriff has discussed, is management of the movement of these people that are being taken out of the county and away from their families and their attorneys and their ability to return to go to court. But if we don't consolidate the jail, as many of you know, we have been trying to accomplish this consolidation for years, and the costs continue to increase. Further delay across the communities, further limit the size of the consolidated jail as the public is concerned to visit businesses across the community because of the shootings. A closed downtown jail without a consolidated jail, when our satellite jail only holds 140 people safely, would be catastrophic, leaving our community less safe while not addressing the ever-growing cost of housing the 140 inmates out of the county, while risking loss of more corrections staff and the support for the programs that we would have in the jail and the ability to protect the people that are in the jail properly. I appreciate your support for this resolution. Permit. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to address the Committee of the Whole of the Urbana City Council? Seeing no one, come on up and state your name, and you'll have 5 minutes.
Tiny ghetto. Can you guys hear me okay? Is it on?
Tilt it up just a little bit
Up.
more. There you go.
Okay, I'm short. It's hazard of the height, I guess. I'm Emily Rodriguez. I represent County Board District 8. I wanted to speak to address the approval of the special use permit. So I've spoken to several of you on the issues, giving you kind of context and how we came to it, the decision, et cetera, and my feedback on it. But seeing as I was the single no vote on that, the plan, I wanted to explain, I guess, my reasoning behind that. First, starting with why I did not vote to approve the plan, right? So I did not vote no because I believe that no work needs to be done on the jail. I did not vote no because I believe that the downtown jail is a viable option to renovate. I think that would be an inhumane option. I did not vote no because I believe that simply letting this kind of rot into the ground is a viable option for a community. All of those reasons are why are not why I voted no. Sorry for the double negative. It's hard to explain any other ways. Why I did vote no is because I did not believe that we did the work to build consensus on this issue. And I want to commend the work that leadership on the county board did to set up those special hearings, right? But as it was noted, attendance was low. I credit, I don't know, maybe a global pandemic, something like that, maybe for tamping down efforts to educate the public. But the function, what I wish, if I could redo it again, sorry, I'm kind of collecting myself now. If I could go back, again, I voted no, I would have moved to vote to table the motion for a town hall. That to me is the big piece of what we're missing here. We did not, once again, build public consensus on this issue. It's not so much just arguing yes or no to a jail. In my mind, a town hall would give the opportunity to say, to justify this particular plan. Why is this plan, like the positive case for this plan moving forward, right? To outline the decision points that we have and say, this is why we landed right here. And to take feedback on that, right? We can structure a town hall in a way that would allow for that kind of feedback. Several of you know that after this vote happened, I had no intention of running again for office. Straight up, I emailed the county party and I said I did not want to run. And that is because I felt that we did a lot of harm in the way that we, in my mind, rushed this vote. And we did not pause for a town hall. That was my number one ask, if we could pause for a town hall. So I hope that you do not repeat my error. Instead of voting any other way, yes or no, I would suggest table for the next meeting. And just to kind of, I know that I can see Mayor, I wanted to address some counter arguments here. So I understand that there have been opportunities for the public to take in the information on this particular plan. Once again, we are in the midst of a pandemic. And then also, this has already come down on a referendum, right? We know, even if people are not showing up to our special jail committee meetings, we know that this sentiment exists out there. I know that you know that the sentiment exists. It's in your inbox, right? So to me, in my mind, the reason why this was so harmful is because we took the single most animating issue in this county, and we did not pause to build consensus on it. And again, I hope that you will do better than, or I hope that you will not make the same mistake. Thanks.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to address the Committee of the Whole of the Urbana City Council? Okay, last call. Yes. Okay, go ahead, Chris.
New project for Urbana. My name is Charles Davidson, Outreach Specialist for First Followers. First Followers' mission is to build strong and peaceful communities by providing support and guidance to the formerly incarcerated and their loved ones. We also combat against gun violence. First Followers would like to start a drop-in center in Urbana. We have ran a drop-in center in Champaign for 7 years, serving over 400 people. We did research in 3 wards in Urbana. There are hundreds of young people in these areas. There's always been a challenge between the Twin Cities or turf issues, we can solve that problem by putting a drop-in center here in Urbana. I myself never liked living in Champaign, and I'm 71 years old and I still feel the same. So this is a great way to support victory over violence. Thanks. If you can read this in public input, that would be great. Have a blessed day, and thank you for supporting First Followers. More to come.
All right, thank you. Is that the only one you have?
Yeah.
Any others?
It's another one that was sent to all of us. It says, Dear Urbana City Council members, my name is Claudia Lenhoff, and I am the Executive Director of the Champaign County Healthcare Consumers, CCHCC. I'm writing on behalf of CCHCC to express our support for the special use permit for the renovation of the Champaign County Jail. Our support for the renovation is based on our direct experience working inside the Champaign County jails and working with our clients who were either incarcerated in the jails or whom we met while working in the jails. The jail renovation is needed for public health, public safety, and increased service delivery reasons. It will not result in an increase in the total number of beds from what we currently have. We also come to our position through our belief that people who are incarcerated have human rights and deserve better conditions and better services than what are possible right now given the physical configuration of the satellite jail. Our firsthand knowledge of the jail conditions, that's a section, CCHCC has had a grant from the Champaign County Mental Health Board for several years now, which funds CCHCC for providing services to individuals who are justice involved, including by having a CCHCC staff member work inside the county jails, satellite and downtown, to provide services. The services we have been providing include enrollment in Medicaid, SNAP, parentheses, food stamps, medical debt assistance, healthcare coordination, and prescription assistance. Many of our clients start out in the jail but are then released, and we keep up with them and help them and their families once they are out of jail. The current congregate configuration of the pods and multi-bunk cells has placed everyone at risk of COVID despite mitigation efforts. In fact, mitigation efforts are especially challenging given the physical configuration of the jail. It's hard to keep people separate who need to be separated. The last 2 years have been very challenging because of COVID, and our staff member, Chris Garcia, has not been able to do his work inside the jail, but has instead been providing services to jail inmates through referral and usually over the phone. I guess the timer's not going. There's more. Do I have time to keep going?
I can't see the timer.
It's not running, so. Renovation versus expansion, some misconceptions. Although the jail renovations are commonly referred to as a jail expansion, it is important to understand that while the physical space will be expanding, the footprint of the jail will be larger and reconfigured after the downtown jail is closed and the satellite jail space is expanded. There will be fewer beds than what we currently have. Therefore, the jail expansion or renovation is not about incarcerating more people, but about reconfiguring the jail so that it is a healthier and safer environment for the people who do have to spend time in the jail as inmates, sheriff office, correctional staff, and service providers such as CCHCC. Next section, what have satellite jail inmates had to say about their needs in relation to the physical condition of the jail? Several years ago, we held focus groups inside the jail, hearing from groups of men. Limited space did not allow us to hear from the women who were serving their sentence inside the jail. Overwhelmingly, the men told us that more programming space is needed and that inmates who are serving sentences and working programs for improving themselves need a better housing situation so that people working programs who are serious about their self-improvement could be housed with like-minded people and work their programs together. In order to conduct the focus groups in the one and only meeting room / library, an AA meeting had to be canceled. There is currently only one meeting room / library, so only one activity can take place at a time. Men and women cannot be in the same place at the same time, so women get less of the program opportunities than men.
I think that's about 5 minutes.
There's a lot
Yeah.
more, so I'd suggest that just be entered into the record.
All right, thank you. Are there any others? No others? Did anybody else wish to address the committee of the whole? All right, seeing none, we will move on to the next part of the agenda, which is staff reports. Any staff with reports? Mayor Marlin.
Just have one item to report, and is that the second tranche of the ARPA funds have been received by the city of Urbana. A total of $6,487,000, $6,487,280 is now deposited in our accounts.
Thank you for that news. With no other staff reports, we can move on to item ordinance number 2022-06-026, an ordinance approving a special use permit, Champaign County Jail consolidation at 502 South Learman Avenue, Plan Case 2449-SU-22.
All right. Can everybody hear me okay? This is the request by Reefsec Reed Architects on behalf of Champaign County for a special use permit to allow an expansion of the Champaign County Detention Center at 502 South Learman Avenue in the CRE Conservation, Recreation, and Education Zoning District. On June 9th, 2022, the Plan Commission voted unanimously to forward the case 2499 SU-22 to City Council with a recommendation to approve the special use permit with the condition that the proposed addition generally conforms to the site plan in Ordinance Attachment A. Staff finds that the 3 special use permit criteria are met and concurs with the staff recommendation, or the Plan Commission recommendation. This is a location map of the property. The site is approximately 20 acres, part of the larger Champaign County complex. It's located on the east side of Learman Avenue, south of Main Street, and north of Washington Street. I've also called out some of the surrounding uses, as this is part of the larger Champaign County complex. You can see Brookins and Prairie Park to the south, the Juvenile Detention Center and the University Rehabilitation Center to the east, Ilias Training Center and county offices to the north, along with Canada Park, and then the Dart manufacturer to the west. The existing satellite detention center was originally allowed at this location as a government use/building with a special use permit in 1995. Champaign County requests a special use permit to allow for the consolidation of operations that are currently split between the existing satellite and downtown detention centers. The downtown detention center is uninhabitable and was closed earlier this year. Granting the special use permit would allow for the expansion of the existing operation, including an addition to the existing detention center. This is a zoning map of the property. It's split zoned, but the entire site for the Champaign County Satellite Jail is zoned CRE. The adjacent properties are zoned R4 medium density and R6 high density multiple family residential to the north, R4 to the east, CRE to the south, and IN2 heavy industrial to the west. I will point out that while there are adjacent properties that are zoned residential, none of those properties are used for residential uses. The complex uses include the Brookins Administrative Center, Champaign County Juvenile Detention Center, Canada and Prairie Parks, and other Champaign offices, as I pointed out on the last slide. This is the future land use map for the property. The future land use designation for the site is institutional, and the Champaign County Adult Detention Center use is consistent with that designation. I've got a few site photos that'll follow. In May 2011, the National Institute of Corrections evaluated the existing county jails, focusing on the downtown Champaign County Correctional Center at 204 East Main Street. The NIC found that the downtown facility was in deplorable condition and cited disparate gender treatment and issues with treatment for inmates with special needs. In 2012, the Institute for Law and Planning Policy found that the downtown facility suffered from serious structural and mechanical issues and cost-prohibitive staffing. For reference, these are photos of the satellite jail, not the downtown jail. This is the front entrance on the east side. This is the north side of the building. And then the entrance is on the west side. This is the east side where the addition would be built with the special use permit. The special use permit would allow for consolidation of the downtown and satellite detention centers by expanding the satellite facility and centralizing the majority of the Champaign County facilities, staffing, and resources in that location. The proposed addition would allow detainees to be relocated away from downtown Urbana to the satellite site and would allow for that site to be brought into further compliance with NIC standards and the ILP master plan. Champaign County would construct an addition on the eastern side, that's what's pictured here, of the site behind the existing building. The downtown facility is operationally insufficient and non-compliant with the American Correctional Association requirements, as 4% of the facility's capacity is single occupancy cells, where 10% is required. The applicants state that inmates are faced with serious security, behavioral, and health challenges in multi-occupancy cells. The addition would include 2 new housing pods, one with 49 beds and one with 29 beds, which would address the deficiency in single occupancy cells. The total new capacity would be 219 standard compliant beds. The expansion would allow for sight and sound separation between male and female inmates and accommodate the existing and potential overflow populations. This is a general site plan of where the addition would be built, again on the eastern side of the existing building. It's currently undeveloped. And here's a floor plan of the addition. The gray building on the left side of your screen is the existing facility, and the addition is shown on the right. Staff finds that the application meets all 3 special use permit criteria. The existing satellite detention center has been at this location since 1995. The site is located near other governmental and institutional uses and is not adjacent to any residential uses. The proposed addition to the satellite facility would allow for the consolidation of the downtown and satellite facilities and would centralize the majority of the county correctional facilities staffing and resources in one location. The requested special use permit would only allow for the current governmental use to be expanded. It would not allow for a change in use. The special use permit would also allow for the existing facility to be brought into compliance with the ACA standards and allow for the relocation of detainees out of downtown. It would not be unreasonably injurious or detrimental to the district, as the satellite and juvenile detention centers have existed in the area for over 20 years. The use as a correctional facility will remain the same and is consistent with the future land use designation for the property. The existing satellite detention center already conforms to the standards of and preserves the essential character of the surrounding area, as it has operated on this site since 1995 and is surrounded by similar uses. This is a rendering of the proposed addition. Staff published a legal ad in the News Gazette to notify the public of the request and public hearing 15 days prior to the Plan Commission meeting. Staff also sent letters to 13 neighboring property owners notifying them of the request and posted a public hearing sign on the property. We did not receive any public input. We did receive one question about the construction plans for the addition, which the applicants can expand upon, and I've got a site plan for the proposed construction traffic as well. Oh, wait a sec. During the Plan Commission meeting, commissioners asked about Champaign County's relationship with the Urbana Park District and how the proposed addition would affect them. County Executive Darlene Kleppel explained that the county has a good relationship with the Park District and that the proposed addition should not affect any of the nearby parks. The Plan Commission also asked about the construction and landscaping for the new addition. The addition will be brick masonry to match the existing jail, and the surrounding site will be grassed. This is a photo of that rendering. The building will be constructed in conformance with the Illinois jail standards, and plans will be reviewed by the state as well as the city. Stormwater detention for the existing jail and addition is provided by 2 on-site detention basins. All right. The city council has the following options on the requested special use permit. Approve the ordinance with certain terms and conditions, or deny the ordinance. On June 9th, 2022, the Plan Commission voted unanimously to forward the case to City Council with a recommendation of approval with the condition that the proposed addition be built in general conformance to the site plan in Ordinance Attachment A. Again, staff found that the special use permit request meets all 3 of the special use permit criteria, and we concur with the Plan Commission recommendation. The applicants are here to make a statement, and I can answer any technical questions for staff.
All right. Do you want the applicants to come forward, or in case there are questions?
Yeah.
Do we have any questions? Grace is going to go first.
Thank you. I had a few technical questions to start with. About the soccer field, I was a little confused watching the Plan Commission meeting about if it is taking up a soccer field with this proposal, and it sounds like, I mean, I got to answer that we've talked to the Park District, but my question is, will it take up the soccer field, or is that not in the footprint of the proposal?
There is a backup soccer field that is to the backside, which the construction will occur. It's not a regularly used soccer field, and there are several other soccer fields around the building.
But it will take up one of them?
It'll take one of the soccer fields that's currently, I will say, partly being used.
Thank you. And then my other question was just about clarification on the additional number of single-person cells. Because was it the pod with 49 humans, and 9 of those would be single, if that's right? And I was wondering about the 29 unit. It's like 6 units of 2 to 5 single occupancy. Like, are all 25 of those single occupancy?
Well, that's good. Most of them are single occupancy. Since I don't have the plan right in front of me, I believe there are 24 single occupancy cells. Does that sound right, Brian? 24, 25 single occupancy. 1 housing unit can be double bunked in that special needs pod, but all the other cells are single occupancy.
Okay. And then I was reading in here about the negative pressure medical observation separation cell, and can't say I didn't have to Google more about that, but it sounds like it's just the ventilation system for airborne, potentially infectious things. And I saw that's in the special needs ward. Would that be like, if someone who weren't otherwise in the special needs ward had COVID or something infectious, would they use that as well as like a common medical isolation, or just for the special needs ward?
Oh, it would be for anybody in the facility. Yeah, it's any kind of contagious disease, yes. And it is single pass air, so it's brought in and exhausted.
Thank you. And then I was wondering about some of the talk on the enhanced or expanded medical facilities. And I'll have to say I didn't until recently enough get in on electronic version where I can zoom in. So I didn't really take away much from the printed version of the floor plan. So I didn't know if we could have some more explanation on the enhanced medical facilities in this proposal.
Sure. Would you be able to pull up that floor plan?
Sure.
Might be easier to talk about it.
Could you speak directly into the microphone more?
Sorry.
Thank you.
Okay, if you could, can you zoom further?
Let's see. How's
There,
that?
that's pretty good. So the extension that comes to the east, you see that central corridor between the north pod and the south pod. At the east end of that corridor, on the north side of that corridor, is our medical unit that has a couple of medical exam rooms, a dental operatory, space for medical staff, a pharmacy. That's immediately adjacent and accessed from the special needs pod, which is that north pod. So currently, and I'm sorry if you could zoom back out just a little bit, there's a white area in the existing building, not that, that's master control right there. That's the current health area in the satellite jail. So it's a rather large expansion and much more appropriate for a facility of this size. Thank you.
Thank you for the explanation. Yeah, it's really hard to make out that floor plan. I don't know if there's a way to make it more
I've got the staff report. I
zoomable.
think I can get a bigger version.
And then I was also, my last more technical question was about the downtown jail building, understanding that it's in poor condition and not economically making sense to try and restore that one. I'm wondering what the plan was, because I feel like I also got some emails about, then Urbana can have it, and that'll be a great asset for us. I'm kind of wondering what's the plan, and also in line with, if it's not being worth for the county to do anything, what's the benefit for Urbana to do something with the building in poor condition like that?
So the county intends to demolish the building and then potentially redevelop it in some way. We have no plan, we don't have a set plan for that yet. We have gotten no public input on that yet.
Thank you, appreciate the answers.
All right, who would like to go next? Chris?
We're just doing technical questions right now.
Right now, questions, yeah.
Okay. Kat, you said there's 3 criteria, correct?
Yes.
Okay, when I looked through the special use permit application, and it said, the applicant was asked, explain how the proposed use is designed, located, and proposed to be operated so that it will not be unreasonably injurious or detrimental to the district in which it shall be located, or otherwise injurious or detrimental to the public welfare. So I'm asking, are we allowed to inquire about the use of the building, what goes on inside the building, and how it affects the public welfare?
I would say yes, and I am
Without looking at the application, I know.
and looking to Kevin for reiteration on that. But special use permits inherently deal with the proposed use. Because this is an expansion of the use that's already on the property.
Right.
I still think those are
Well,
valid questions.
the applicant said, they answered that question, and they said, it will resolve critical deficiencies in housing for special needs and female inmates and create program, health care, and exercise spaces that better facilitate inmate well-being. So can we explore that?
Yes, and I would direct any specific questions about the use to the applicant.
Right.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, I do want to point out, when we're talking public welfare, and I think Dave Westner sent his memorandum to all council members, we're really focused on the welfare sort of external facing. So it's not really what happens inside so much as how what happens on the site affects the public outside, if that makes sense.
No, David said, that Wesner said, the public at large. The applicant said that it will affect the quality of the inmate's life inside, so.
Well, and I think that's fine to discuss that, but I do think that, well, as Dave said, it's mostly concerned with how it affects neighboring properties. That's a basic charge of zoning.
That's not what he said. He equalized it. He said public welfare at large or the other people around the building.
In any case, you could go ahead and ask your question, I think.
Thank you. Okay. All right. So I don't know where we're at in the proceeding. That was my technical question to staff.
I think it would be reasonable for you to ask the applicant right now about the
Thank you.
programmatic
Thank you, Mr.
impact.
Chair. Okay.
Because it's part of the application.
Okay. So Dustin, thank you for answering some questions beforehand. I asked you about special needs, You said it is the physically sick, the physically injured, those confined to a wheelchair, those that require an oxygen tank and a respirator, and those diagnosed mentally ill or developmentally disabled. I guess my first question tonight is, do you know why we're prosecuting people in wheelchairs?
That would be a question for the prosecutor who's the state's attorney's office.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I just thought you might know. And the same would be for respirators and oxygen tanks and all that.
Yeah, the one thing I would say is there's a division of government functions, and the judges will make the determination on who's remanded to my custody. That's the point that I was trying to make is I'm given inmates, and then I have to act in their best interest. I don't have the say on who comes to custody, who goes out of custody, things like that. So those would really be questions on the prosecution or on the judicial side.
You can comment on the availability of, in the Department of Health Services, in other words, where to put mentally ill people. What's the status in Illinois right now with facilities like that?
So currently I have 11 inmates, I believe, that have been found unfit to stand trial that are still in my custody, that are waiting for the Department of Human Services to accept them. And so they can't be released on bond, even if they could afford bond. They can't be transported because the Department of Human Services has to accept them first. And so they're just kind of in my facility. And the way our facilities are organized or constructed is our isolation cells are downtown, and that environment is not the environment we want for somebody who is in custody who already has mental health issues. So that's one thing that this consolidation will look at is if they have to be in custody in the first place, and there's nothing else, no other assistance that we can provide them. We got to provide them the best assistance possible, and that's what the consolidation really will do.
Okay. Question for the architect. So when is this going to be done, if we started right now?
So we are in the construction documents phase as the architectural process goes along.
Mm-hmm.
We're submitting 50% construction documents to the county this month. Our schedule is to be able to go out to bid in October, accept bids in November, I believe, and start construction, start construction immediately thereafter. Now, that's not necessarily a good time to start construction, but a lot of things have a lot of long lead times to order, so all that kind of thing can be done. We're currently projecting about 18 months of construction, so about middle of 2024 completed.
So Dustin, if your population doesn't change, we're spending another $2 million next year to house out-of-county inmates, right? If the population doesn't change.
That's correct. This was kind of, the conversation has, last year, I don't know if you all kept up with the county board or not, but last year the county board approved a plan to close the downtown jail. And then we had an increase in population, and it didn't make sense at that time to house out of county when we still had space here. And then with the gun violence and things that occurred in the community, now we are still housing out of county, even without the 140. So we had 70 out of county and 70 downtown. The staffing shortage that I was experiencing contributed to the immediate need we need to just take action and get this place closed.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So, I mean, Dustin, if you can quickly, can you explain why the sudden jump in population? 2021, it was 213 a day. Suddenly, we're at 304. Can you give a short explanation why that happened?
Well, the simple answer is arrests have increased. And so I can't remember if I went into it a little bit in my letter or not. However, we continuously, and by we I mean the judiciary, the state's attorney, and I, continuously look at that list of inmates that are in custody, and it's actually available online and it's updated daily, so you can see the inmates who are in custody, the offenses they're accused of committing, and everything like that, looking for reasons that we can try to get them out and maybe better serve with community alternatives and things like that. That is very, very, very difficult to do. We are even still issuing notice to appear on warrants for failure to appear just because of our jail population and how increased it is.
Okay. we talked about programs. You have 17 programs for males and 8 for women. You told me that you're trying to get those programs back up and running. So where are we at, and what's going to go on? How are you, like, over the next 2 years as we're waiting for the new building, are you going to be able to do that stuff?
We are. So the main reason why we stopped programming was because of COVID-19.
Right.
Volunteers who a lot of times are elderly didn't want to come in and risk getting COVID-19. As you can imagine, in our population, it's vulnerable anyways. We didn't want COVID-19 running rampant in the jail. And so that's where we cut back our programs. We have actually started implementing them back in. Now, the good thing about this consolidation project is we have, so we call it classification. And so, for an example, inmate A can't be around inmate B, who can't be around inmate C. That's where our complication comes. That's why when I say technically we have 295 beds right now, but we are full at 212, I would say, because certain inmates can't be around each other. Well, obviously, that really comes into account whenever we're talking about programs. And so if you can't have 15 inmates together, you may not be able to find somebody to come in and do a program 15 times. You know what I mean, if they can't all be around each other. The good thing about this consolidation project is not only will there be 2 big classrooms, we have one currently, so we'll add a second classroom, but we'll also add some program space in those special management pods. And so we don't necessarily, if somebody has behavioral issues, we don't necessarily have to take them all the way through the jail in order to get programming. We can actually take the programming to them and still do it in a safe manner.
Okay, great. Will there be a doctor and a nurse staffing the jail 24 hours a day? 7 days a week?
No, we do not have 24/7 coverage. Right now, I believe we have about 18 hours a day of coverage, and the doctor is there, I believe, 8 hours a week.
Okay. Will inmates be able to contact medical staff, either a nurse or a doctor, at all hours of the day to report symptoms?
Yeah, so generally, we have a medical request form, and if a nurse is there, they will immediately address that need of the inmate. If it is something that appears to be needs addressed when medical staff is not there, then we send them out to the hospital. Generally, Carl Hospital is where we send them to. We err on the side of caution and make sure we get that person evaluated. Our medical staff is available 24/7 for calls, and that's answered by a doctor. And so the majority of the time, my staff, if there's not a nurse on scene, my staff will contact the doctor, describe the symptoms and things, and 9 times out of 10, the doctor says, go ahead and send them to the ER, let's get them evaluated, and then get them back. Yep.
That's great. I'm glad to hear that.
Yep.
I mean, Toya Frazier was before your time, but thank you for doing that. So can any inmate, whether sick or not, request a routine physical? Or is that too optional?
I don't know the answer to that question. I
It's
know
probably never
that every
come up,
inmate that comes in, there is I don't want to say quick physical, but there is some type of general physical that has occurred. Now, we're not talking about the kind of physical you would get at your doctor's office annually. But, health questionnaire, things like that. But I cannot answer if every inmate who would request a physical would get one.
Okay. Can inmates get a second opinion?
I guess the second opinion would be going to the emergency room.
Yeah. Okay.
My experience, and we just transitioned to a new healthcare provider. My experience is that our healthcare providers will err on the side of caution. And so even for liability wise, if somebody's saying, no, I don't believe that's true, something else is going on, they're going to send them for a second opinion at the ER anyways. I don't want to officially speak on that, but that's been my experience so far.
Okay, great. Can inmates have access and communicate to their regular doctors on the outside should they have been under the care of somebody else before they came into the jail?
So that would be our nursing staff does try, and by nursing, American ACH. So they do try to keep that continuity of care. And so they will speak with Carl. They have access to the records for Carl and OSF and Christy to try to keep up with the medical history of an inmate. I can't say specifically whether they will call that physician and get specific guidance or not,
Right.
but I know they do have access to former medical records.
So it's possible. you
Correct,
might
yes.
say. Okay. Can they inmates receive copies of their medical records that they generate in jail?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. Is there a process to file grievances if they don't feel like their medical care is, for some reason, is substandard?
Absolutely. And I cannot quote to you the length of time between a grievance and when a response is required, but there is a minimal length of time, I believe it's a couple of days, that our healthcare provider has to address that grievance one way or the other that the inmate has filed.
Okay, thanks. Might be for the architect. Are the sick inmates on the single occupancy cells, will they have a toilet and a sink?
Yes, every cell has a toilet and a sink.
Of the new cells, right?
All the new cells have a toilet and a sink, yeah.
Sheriff, could you maybe, or whoever can answer it, is there a distinction between solitary confinement and single occupancy cells?
So right now, I would, and I'm not going to take a poll, but I would, if anybody's been to the downtown jail, you will see that we would consider our isolation cells as solitary confinement. At the consolidated facility, the good thing is, and why we did it with 4 or 5 individual cells, is because they're still going to have windows. They're still going to have a little day area, and Chuck, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but right now, their movement is limited because of their behavioral issues or things like that. There's just nowhere to let them recreate. However, we would be able to give them a little bit more space in the single occupancy cells that then have that commons area as well. So maybe 2 of them can be out at a time as opposed to just having to be out individually. It really does help us use our space better and really get the inmates as much as we can give them while they're in our custody.
Sheriff, could you talk about the legend that I hear about the naked room, where inmates are stripped naked and put in an isolation cell? Do you know why that's done?
Sure. So I'm assuming you're talking about the green gown on suicide watch. And so basically what happens is if an inmate comes in and they say they're suicidal, or they don't answer questions about suicide, we assume that they're suicidal. Now, that is a overall jail that's not necessarily unique to the Champaign County Correctional Facilities.
Right.
That is a way that jails operate in order to help ensure that the inmate's not going to harm themselves.
Who's conducting that examination? The correctional staff?
Which examination?
Well, the determination that they're suicidal.
Yes, so there's a mental health questionnaire that is given to every single inmate that comes through the door. And then if there are indicators that somebody may be suicidal or even homicidal, mental health staff will follow up with them, yes.
Okay, so they're not actually naked, they're in a green gown, is
Correct.
that correct? Okay. Are they given a blanket?
I believe so. But at a minimum, they're given a green gown to cover up.
Okay.
Yes.
Will the sick inmates be allowed to socialize, like play cards and interact with other people in that kind of that 6 medical unit area?
Yeah, unless their classification would require them to not be around anybody else. Absolutely. That's one thing that this consolidation will accomplish is now they actually get that interaction as opposed to just being there by themselves.
Okay. Will some inmates be, obviously you're dealing with mental patients as well. Are some of these, is there ever a time, is it necessary to put them in 4-point restraints? I'm thinking of a bed and 4-point hands, feet, shackled.
No, that would take a medical order. in order to do that. There have been times where we have had to restrain inmates from self-harm. However, that is on recommendation of medical staff.
And is that the restraining chair?
It could be, sure.
Okay. And how long are they left in the restraining chair?
I can't answer that question, but I know as little time as possible.
If they spit on correctional staff, will a spit hood be placed on them?
No. Not that I'm aware of.
Really? Okay. Do you have a taser policy?
We do.
Okay. I noticed in your annual report from 2021, you don't keep track of use of force. I'm assuming that use of force, the 108 that you cited, was for the deputies on patrol, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And are you keeping track of what the correctional officers are doing?
We do. Actually, correctional officers are required to write a report every time a use of force above and beyond normal escorting and things like that. They're required to write a report on that.
Okay.
And using a taser, even activating a taser but not tasing somebody, would result in a report.
So you have a count if somebody FOIA'd for
Absolutely.
that? You could do that. Okay, thank you.
To the best of my knowledge, yes.
Okay. So when an inmate expresses depression and suicidal thoughts, are they just left in the single cell by themselves most of the time, or do they have access to psychiatry or social workers or even family?
So we have mental health staff that are full-time. They're not there as much as regular nursing staff are. I believe they're there 40 hours a week. And that also includes psychiatry services. A certain amount of hours a week, yes. So they are generally, if they need extra attention, so usually suicidal, then they would be put in a cell by themselves, if possible, and then the mental health staff would follow up with them.
Okay. Are mentally ill inmates, are ones that are diagnosed mentally ill, are they forced to take psychotropic medications, do you know?
They are not.
So
Not
they could
unless we have a
refuse
court order.
medication if they wanted to.
What was the last part?
They could refuse medication if they wanted to. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, there's actually been cases where we've had to go before the judiciary and attempt to get a court order for our staff to do medication.
Okay.
And so, yes.
Will police detectives be allowed to conduct criminal investigation interviews while they're sick on the medical unit at the county jail?
I can't answer that. That would likely be a case-by-case basis.
It's possible, though.
Sure.
Okay. Will any utterances that sick inmates make while medicated, while on the unit, be used as evidence against them in court of law?
I cannot answer that.
You don't know? Okay. Will sick inmates who are undergoing drug withdrawal symptoms be pressured by law enforcement to snitch on their dealers?
I cannot answer that.
Okay. You don't know if it's ever happened, or it's just too much detail. Okay,
Yep.
that's fine. So will the medical unit be able to perform emergency surgery?
No.
No.
So
That
when
would-
you think of a medical unit, don't think of somebody needing immediate intervention. Think of somebody with a CPAP machine, for an example, or somebody, who has, let's just use it as an example, has been shot in the past and they're still doing some wound care, but they don't need the direct care of a physician. That is the type of medical unit we're running, not necessarily that 24/7 nursing staff there at your bedside because you need that immediate attention. No, we would send those out to the hospital immediately.
Okay, great. Are inmates allowed to talk to that are on the sick unit allowed to talk to their attorneys?
Sure. Inmates are always allowed to talk to their attorneys.
Okay, great. What about dental care, like an emergency dental? Would that be taken to the hospital again?
I would say emergency, yes. We actually have a contract with a dentist in Villa Grove that has regular checkups and things like that for inmates. But I would imagine in any emergency situation, it would go to Carl Hospital.
Okay, great. Will female inmates be allowed unlimited access to gynecologists, or, I mean, what kind of medical care is for female inmates? I mean, I imagine it's different. Also, you know, pregnancy or, you know, well, I don't know. How do you define all that? But
So our medical provider has certain protocol. That's why we contract out our medical services. So the medical provider has certain protocols. I will tell you that recent legislation, we have to give special treatment to females who come in who are pregnant, and so we have to make sure their bed isn't any higher than a certain height and things like that.
yeah. Okay.
How you doing there, Chris?
I'm almost done. Thank you. I appreciate your
Okay, just
patience.
checking.
Yeah. What about pain medications? You say there's a pharmacy on the new expansion?
Well, we currently have a pharmacy now.
You do? Okay.
Yes, and that is prescription. You know, medical staff have to approve meds and things like that.
Right. But can they get pretty much most meds if they need it? I mean,
Yes, and
if it's prescribed. I mean.
So our medical provider will stock common drugs, aspirin, things like that, and then they will also make sure prescriptions are filled if the physician does order something else.
Okay. I'm almost done, Sheriff. I appreciate your patience.
It's fine.
Who does the investigation in cases where a sick inmate dies in the county jail?
So in that situation, it would likely be a multi-jurisdictional task force, which is made up of officers from each individual agencies here in the CU area. So county would obviously take a back seat to that, and generally the state police would come in and they would lead that investigation.
Okay. Can family members of the sick inmate who died get access to the investigation and results of the investigation?
By law, they're now required to, yes.
They are now required
Yes.
to. Okay, thank you. Let me see what else here. You know what, Sheriff, you did it. I have no more further questions. Thanks for everybody's patience.
All right, thank you, Chris. Chandra?
Hi. So a couple questions. One of your, Darlene, one of your board members said that it was decided in 2019, the plan of the jail. Is that correct?
The board officially made a decision about what was happening with the jail this year, or late last year. There have been multitude of discussions and things brought before the board for many years. I don't know what happened behind the scenes with board members, or, you know, that sort of thing. I don't know what discussions happened at that point, but the official county board meetings, the sessions, study sessions, there was no official decision made until recently.
Okay. And you also mentioned that you took into consideration the past decade of public input.
Mhm.
Could you sort of maybe pinpoint a couple things that from the public input that hasn't been incorporated into the plan?
Sure. So you will notice the sheriff talked a lot about the medical questions that Chris asked, and we made sure that we were our medical facilities have expanded. We also have more program space, which was one of the things that was mentioned, so that we can have more classes and those kinds of things from outside groups coming in. The facility is not as large as we would have liked to build because of the concern about overbuilding. Those are the ones I can recall right off the top of my head.
Okay. And $5 million of ARPA funds will be used to for the building. It's been sort of, I guess, bounced around that Treasury rule states that construction of jails was ineligible. I assume that because you're using the ARPA funds, that is not the case. Could you sort of explain how ARPA funds can be used in this case?
Sure. So just as the city's allowed to use 10% of its amount, well, I guess it's 10 million actually, the county would be allowed to do the same and use $10 million for county functions. The jail is the primary function of the county sheriff, and so that would be qualified under that application. Obviously, we're not building the whole building. We're not spending all of our money doing that, but we are putting some of the money in for the reasons that Stephanie mentioned earlier. And it will fall within our $10 million allowance that the county's allowed to use for internal operations.
Okay. And then, so it mentioned it took 11 years to close the downtown jail. And the sheriff mentioned it was sort of motivated, the closure was the staffing shortage. Had there not been a staffing shortage, how much longer would it have taken? Would it have been more time to sort of get the new construction going before it would close, or it was just time?
It would have been preferable for us to not have to house people out of county. That's very expensive to do, and it's creating lots of issues for people that are needing to see attorneys and the public defender getting there and those kind of things. But the building is not in a condition where the sheriff can safely staff it with the number of people that he has available right now. And so it speeded up the process. Regardless, a decision would have had to be made fairly shortly. The last time that someone went up and repaired the roof, they said they won't get on the roof again. So it's those kinds of things. We're to the point where we really have to put some serious money into it if we're going to keep it open.
Okay, thank you.
All right, next, Sharice.
I really only have one question that I was thinking of, having toured the satellite jail, and my main question is, in what way will there be some upgrading, number one, to the satellite jail itself, but also will female prisoners have their own space? Because when I did that tour, I was appalled at how the fact that females have no private space. Basically, it's like a door that separates their section from the male section, and just that door. So could you give me some more information about that?
Sure. Your first question about work done within the existing satellite jail. We are replacing security electronics throughout the existing satellite jail. We're converting what is now outdoor exercise areas in the 2 existing pods to indoor exercise spaces, so that those spaces can be used year-round instead of just in nice weather. And we're upgrading master control just because of the fact we're adding a certain amount of cells to this facility. The question about females, yes, that's a real deficiency in the jail now. One of the problems with the housing females is that there's quite a fluctuation in the amount of females the county has to have in jail. That number, my mind seems to recall it's like between 8 and 31, and that can jump over a couple of weeks' time. So there's a lot of flexibility built into the new pods to allow females to take up just the amount of space they need, yet create separations as required. Will be sight and sound separated from males as required by jail standards.
Okay, thank you very much.
The other thing which might be interesting for you to know is that the new jail, although we're not making the renovation to the old part of the jail, but made an improvement to the new part of the jail, we are putting in a geothermal heating system. So that will be a more sustainable way to go forward.
I just got one question,
Just,
James.
was there anybody else who hasn't had a chance yet? I'll get back to you, Chris. Jaya.
Yeah, I was hoping you could speak a little bit to how the Champaign County Justice Task Force and the Champaign County Racial Justice Task Force reports informed this proposal.
Well, I can speak to that as a member of the former Community Justice Task Force. So I think that the people you see in the room tonight, the state's attorney was part of that group. Several of the county board members have been parts of those groups as they've gone forward. They've been invited to speak, as well as the county board paying for different kinds of studies to be done. We've tried to then look at those things and incorporate some of those things in the process of the design. So we've paid attention. I realize we haven't been able to accomplish every single thing that they've recommended, but we have tried to incorporate as much as possible in this facility that we're able to with regard to the jail itself.
Are there specific recommendations from those reports that have been incorporated into this proposal?
Well, I go back to mentioning more program space, more outside more exercise space, more medical space, more family visiting space, all those kinds of things that we've tried to incorporate as much as possible while still having enough cells for the people to be housed in. There's other programs as well. You probably are not related to the jail itself, but the county has many other programs. Their reentry program, where the county is now funding a social worker that's working in the sheriff's office. Those kind of things the county has invested in the past several years as well.
All right. Okay, Chris.
What's the exercise room going to contain? A basketball rim, weights? What kind of exercise will they be able to do?
Go for it.
Then the reason I'm laughing behind my mask is we haven't got to that amount of detail yet. I will tell you that our current exercise space started out with basketball hoops, so inmates could recreate and things with basketball, and they ended up trying to throw the basketballs over the side up into the fencing, and they destroyed the basketball hoops, and so they were eventually taken down. As far as exercise equipment and things like that, we've never really had space to make that happen, and so I think it would be interesting now that we would have potentially indoor and outdoor space, what we can do with that. So I would hesitate to answer that, but I think the possibilities are there.
All right, Grace.
Thanks, sir. I thought a few more questions along the way. Could you tell us what was the county's ARPA amount in total?
We received a little bit over $40 million.
Okay, thank you. And other questions were, what would be the impact of this construction on the current satellite jail space and operations? Like, would you have to close the outdoor courtyard in that time or close any other operations while the construction's happening?
There will be some amount of transition planning that will have to happen as we make the connection to the buildings and the outdoor space and that sort of thing. Those certain parts of it will have to be closed for short periods of time for that piece of the construction to occur, but we will have a construction plan that outlines what those are, try to keep those to a minimum if possible. And the fact that the sheriff is housing people out of county means that we do have some flexibility as cells become vacant. We can move people or those kinds of things and try to make that adjustment.
Thank you. And then another question was, what if the population of people in the jails changes drastically more or less after construction? I read something about flexibility, like would double cells become single or possibly single become double or just house out of state with increase? What would be those contingency plans for more or less population?
Well, for now, the contingency plan is to continue to move people out of county. That's our plan right now.
You said
in
out
the
of state, I
future,
assume you
I think
understand
the
it's out of
question is
county.
whether we're overbuilding. You're asking if we're overbuilding the facility?
No, I'm asking what would be the plans for a population more or less than 219 beds? Sounds like more would be housed out of county, thank you. And then less
would be more people get single cells.
So those doubles can convert to single. Okay, yeah, thank you. That's the question. And then last one was, it's hard to predict the future, and I'm not saying it's, an end-all be-all, but do you think that there would be disparity between the old and new sections? Like, I'm not as familiar with the condition or the floor plan here of the older part of the building of people feeling like it's, the privileged kind of group that's in the new part and the older part's not up to the same kinds of standards. Do you feel like there would be a feeling of disparity like that? Or I'm not sure how similar the proposed and current buildings kind of are.
Well, the units are different. So the older part has fewer individual cells. The newer part has more individual cells. So there's obviously people who would get an individual cell might be perceived as special. On the other hand, people who are getting along better get to be in the double cells. So maybe that won't. That might not happen. They might think it's better to be in a cell with somebody else, to not be as alone. The spaces are laid out differently, so the places where there are single cells give us more flexibility to move people into smaller pods so that they can do more individual services. But it also means there's more walls and there's a little bit less visibility, like clear across the pod. So that'd be hard to say. I guess it depends on what people would value.
Thank you.
All right, Chandra.
For the sheriff, you mentioned your staffing issues. Has that improved?
I will say it's stabilized. It has not improved at all.
So if you have staffing issues now, how do you, plan for that expansion? I understand that it'll all be consolidated in one space, but you'll have, more physical space to monitor.
Sure, absolutely. So the amount of space that we will have will essentially be equivalent to the downtown jail and then the satellite jail. So our staffing at a normal level. And so closing the downtown jail right now allows us to take that staff and move them to the satellite while we're working on recruitment and retention in order to build backup staffing for when, in the middle of 2024, whenever the consolidation is complete.
Gotcha. I had another question. Now it's slipped my mind, and this is why I write things down. Shoot.
I have a couple questions, so I'm going to ask Mary Alice to take the chair.
Sure, I'll take the chair, and the chair
And then I'll
recognizes
give Fonda
James.
some time to remember her question while I ask a couple. Sheriff, if you could tell us right now, how many different locations are we housing inmates outside of the county, and which counties are we doing that in?
Sure. Out of county, we have 3 different jails right now. Piatt County, which we have 1 inmate at, and that's generally if an inmate needs protective custody, say a police officer or something that was arrested and in our custody, we will always send them out of county. So Piatt County has 1 of our inmates. The majority of our inmates right now that are housed out of county are at Kankakee County, and then we also have 10 inmates at Macon County. That's been part of the complication in getting the downtown jail closed. I can't mandate other counties take inmates, and so they have to be willing to do so.
And they have to have the space in order to do
Correct.
that. How would you compare the care and treatment of our residents when they're housed outside of our county? Is it equivalent to what we would do for them?
So we all have the same standards. I would say, how to be politically correct with this. I'm an elected official, and I'm elected by the people of Champaign County. And so the people of Champaign County want certain things, an increase in programs as opposed to incarceration. I can make that happen. I don't have a say over what another sheriff does in his county, if that makes sense. So that's why it is so important that if we have to have inmates, we keep them local, because that way the community has influence on how those inmates
So
are.
you're accountable to us, so if something goes wrong,
Absolutely.
we can do something about it at the polling place.
Absolutely.
What kind of hardships does it put on inmates if they're being housed in a jail in Kankakee versus being here?
So I would say the biggest hardship right now is is more for the attorneys. So the attorneys have to, for public defender, for an example, that has a exorbitant caseload, has to then travel to Kankakee County in order to meet with inmates, whereas normally they'd be able to stay in the county. And they may be able to see more inmates in that amount of time that it takes them to see 1 inmate now. So that's one of the big things. Technology-wise, we're all pretty equivalent. We have video phones and things like that in the satellite jail. We don't have iPads that people can text on and things like that. Some jails do. We don't here. So that technology-wise and things, we're pretty equivalent. But right now, that biggest hindrance is that attorney-inmate meeting time, if that makes sense. We're not withholding them from seeing their attorneys. It's just more effort on the attorneys to be able to diligently speak with them.
Okay. Several years ago, I got to tour both the downtown jail and the satellite facility, and this was when Dr. Kalmanoff was advising us on our jail question. One of the things he emphasized, which is one of the other bullets near the ones that Stephanie read from the report, was the value of direct supervision model. Is the new pods that we're seeing here all based on that modern capability to make the management of the jail efficient?
It is. And so if you see in the very middle of that, let's just call it the north pod and the south pod there's a little space in the very middle there of each of those 2 pods. That's surrounded by windows, and so the correctional officer that's in the middle can then have that direct line of sight to all inmates, including into the day rooms and things like that of the inmates, that provides them that better supervision, yes.
Yeah, it's really hard to appreciate that without having been in the downtown jail, which is horrible for supervision. It's horrible for many other reasons.
Yep.
Its condition, the model that they used for it was like a 20-year-old model when they built it and such. But still, from a standpoint of safety, both for inmates and for staff, it is just a layout that is not conducive to that. And that's, I haven't heard anybody mentioning that, but that's one of the benefits of consolidating on a pod system like we're looking at. All right, thank you. I will take the chair back now, Mary Alice.
All right, I'll relinquish the chair back to James.
All right, Chandra, did we give you enough time?
Yes. So if construction, procurement, and bidding and all of that stuff still needs to happen, couldn't that happen simultaneously, I guess, as a town hall? Like this special use permit can, if passed today, couldn't there still be a town hall for people to get a bigger picture of what's happening? And if possible, you know, there could be minor changes in this plan based on more public input. I'm just wondering why there was no, you know, due to COVID, of course, people weren't attending meetings in person. Could now be the time to have that process where people can, you know, bring forth? Because as I mentioned in an email, there are, you know, people who are engaged who didn't know that these meetings were happening. Perhaps, you know, they don't keep up with county board things, but I think that the jail is a big, I guess, controversial item in this town, especially given the past decade and the referendum and all of that stuff. I think offering people the most opportunity to give input, you know, decreases on hurt feelings or not feeling heard, all of that, especially if there's going to be, you know, 18 months and months of other things before it even, you know, breaks ground. So it just seems that there is time for more input to be considered.
Yeah, we've been considering input, as we've mentioned, several of us mentioned, we've been doing this for a very long time. There's been input going on for 14 years, since the very first time that this was mentioned, that we needed more space or we needed different space, or it would be more efficient to run the space as one unit instead of two different places. The public has come to many, many, many meetings. And to be honest, I can say I haven't heard a whole lot new over all these years. It is true that some people are not in favor of the project and probably never will be. And it is also true that there are some people who have been advocating for it for 17 or 14 years and are, you know, hoping that it will finally occur. So both of those sides still exist. We haven't really changed the minds of some folks, which is fine. What I can say is that we're responsible for housing people. We're responsible for doing it in a responsible way. And we're liable if we don't. And I'm happy to hear, and I'm available and talk to many people from all different sides of this question. I know all the board members have spoken with people at length. We can talk about it for a long time in future, and I don't know that we're going to get any closer to a consensus. So I mean, we're happy to have more study sessions and more things. The cost goes up every time we do that. So as you heard the one person talk about the cost, they've gone up in the past few years since we originally did our design. They went up again when we redid the design, and they went up again this year when we did it for the third time. So the building is now smaller than it was at the beginning that we started when we did an actual design, and it costs, I would say, at least 2/3 more than it did at that point. So I don't think the county can afford to keep putting it off, and certainly we are at a crisis point where we have to house people. So we're either spending $2 million housing people out of county, or we're starting to work on the construction, which is going to take a couple of years. And I'm not trying to be glib about taking public input. I think we've tried to get public input, and we've incorporated as many arguments or decision points as we can to try to move forward. But I don't think that we're ever going to reach a total consensus on this topic.
Right. Just curious, what's the cost of, like, I don't know, renovating and bringing up to code the downtown jail versus adding on? Just curious.
We have not done that study. We did do you remember when it was when we talked about doing the?
2014 and 15, we looked at costs of renovating.
Yeah, it was about 8 or 9 million at that time, wasn't it?
I don't remember, darling.
Yeah, Chuck can't remember what it was at that time. We were talking about doing it when the ADA people came and said you have to do these ADA requirements, and that was going to be a $2 million change just for that part. And we decided that we couldn't do all of those things because the rest of the building was not in good shape either. But he's not remembering what it was. I'm thinking in the neighborhood of 8 or 9 million at that point, so.
Okay.
All right, Grace.
I would make a motion if you feel you've addressed all the questions, opportunities.
Sure.
I would like to move to keep in committee of the whole ordinance number 2022-06-026, an ordinance approving a special use permit with Champaign County Jail consolidation at 502 South Learman.
Is there a second? Seeing no second, that motion fails. Yes, Mary Alice.
I'll make a motion. Maybe this is, I don't know if this is more palatable. I'll move ordinance number 2022-06-026, an ordinance approving a special use permit from Champaign County Jail consolidation at 502 South Learman Avenue, plain case 2449 SU 22 to City Council with no recommendation.
With no recommendation? Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded to pass this to City Council with no recommendation. Is there discussion? Grace.
Thank you. I have a lot of things here. I'll try and be brief and somewhat organized. I was down for the motion to keep it in committee of the whole because I do think that I don't feel comfortable with what we've been presented as having done my due diligence as a council member and for the public to have the information. I understand that this is a big, complicated issue, and I appreciate the gravity of the county having dealt with this for over a decade, but we have not, so I think that this was not enough information for me. I mean, this packet, while I appreciate the brevity and conciseness, I think that 27-page packet is less than we get sometimes when someone wants to build a garage or change something in their driveway. And so I don't think that this is given the due information of the gravity of this situation that I think that it requires and deserves. And as far as Plan Commission, while I do understand that they have a different role when they're looking at the logistical stuff, and at City Council is where we take in more of the public input to represent our constituents. So, I mean, I appreciate the work that they do looking at it logistically. Also, when I watched that meeting, it was less than 20 minutes of presentation, questions, discussion before a vote with absolutely no public input at that meeting whatsoever. So I don't think that as far as the city of Urbana, that I don't think we've done enough to explore or address this issue, inform the public, get some meaningful questions and input. So I think that we need to do more as far as the city goes. I hear the county saying that they've addressed a lot of these things already, and I really do appreciate that. What I'm not seeing that reflected in the information that we've provided to the public. I've gotten a lot of great information from emails to my individual city account from lots of people, but that hasn't gone in the packet for the public to see. And I think that we need more of a packet of a presentation of convincing and justifying for the people of Urbana this special use permit for the use of this space and for the purposes of this building. Before I forget, I wanted to read a little sentence from the memo from Days Wessner, our acting city attorney, where, quote, says, "The first criteria would be determining whether the use is generally accessible, convenient for the public, but more so for those who would be served by the use." So, I mean, he did say to consider the use for the people who would be served, the people who are detained there. So I don't think that it's unreasonable to question the use of the space in its operations. I would love to hear more from the county about what input from the public, from people who are detained in these facilities, what staff from all aspects of enforcement, medical staff, educational staff, volunteers, reentry coordinators, what kind of input was taken from those groups. I do appreciate the email that JR read, some part of Champaign Healthcare Consumers about the need for space for their programming. I think that's all great stuff, but again, I don't think that that was provided in the packet for the public, for the people of Urbana to see. That was something that was provided in an email to us, which was read and will be included in the packet, but I don't think it's put into the big picture of what these decisions mean. I do see some positives. I definitely understand that we have to close the downtown jail, that that's not a fit option. I do see in here that there are some better qualities, more single cells, more program space, gender separation, special needs, medical isolation. But again, I think that all of that needs to be communicated better to the public and let them really understand the issue and have some input on it. Again, I think just justification, all the considerations that the county has made in coming up with this decision, things like justifying the ARPA expense, which I appreciate answering now, but I think having it in writing available to the public would be great. The family visiting space, again, it's kind of hard to read the blueprint and make sense of what's what, so I think that a presentation more than 12 minutes, and from the applicants, I would love to hear more details of the facilities and the things that are planned. And again, I think that needs to be communicated to the public so that they can really understand this issue. I think not unsimilar to the thing like the use of change of use of Greek houses. There was one that the public, had a big kind of misunderstanding or misconception about, and I think it was really great to take a little more time to have people understand it, have some more community buy-in, and make some changes that were actually compromises for the better. So I think that this issue is even more of an impact that needs to be considered with even more gravity. As it is now, I don't feel like we've adequately, I have enough information and understanding of this, and I think that a lot of members of the public don't, with some who have expressed feeling alienated or excluded in this process or in the dark. And yeah, again, it's a big thing. I'm still working on reading through all of the information in the emails and the packets and things that I've been sent, some just more recently, and I have not had enough time to digest and understand this, even with it being delayed another 2 weeks from its original scheduling and the time I first read the memo. So I don't feel like I understand this enough. I'm not convinced that I understand it and that we've done enough due diligence for the public to understand it, to be comfortable passing this as is tonight. Thank you.
Next, Mary Alice.
So, as we talk about this topic, I think one of the things that I'd like to remind my city council members about is that we are considering a special use permit. And so that's why you got the memo from Dave, because I called him up and I said, what case law, what state law, what city law are we supposed to be using to evaluate a special use permit? He told me that there's lots of different case law, but specifically for the city of Urbana, in our zoning ordinance, we have 3 criteria. And those are the only 3 criteria we should be applying to a special use permit. So I'm just going to read so everybody is clear. I know that the city council is, but I want the public to be clear as well. The first criteria is that the proposed use is conducive to the public convenience at that location. The second criteria is that the proposed use is designated, located, and proposed to be operated so that it will not be unreasonably injurious or detrimental to the district in which it shall be located. District here, in my opinion, I think is the zoning district, but, or otherwise injurious to the public welfare. The third item is that the proposed use conforms to the applicable regulations and standards of and preserves the essential character of the district in which it shall be located. So I think that based on Councilman Evans and some of the other questions tonight, I think that the sticking point in terms of the special use permit and which of these 3 criteria that people are talking about is it unreasonably injurious or detrimental to the public welfare? And so I really hammered Dave on this phrase, public welfare. What is the definition of public welfare? And when I had the conversation with him, and it's in, I'm pretty sure he articulated it well in the memo, his interpretation of public welfare, I'm not saying that that's everybody's interpretation, but his interpretation of public welfare had to do with, does the activity at that location, is that going to be injurious to the neighborhood that it's around? So is it going to increase traffic? Is it going to increase fights in different areas? So it's external to it. Now, I know that the applicant put in for this answer, the specific answer about how it would improve the internal life so I think that does open up some questions in terms of how we analyze that number 2. But I just want to say that those are the 3 things that we really should be considering. And in my opinion, number 1 is the public convenience at that location. I think that it's a heck of a lot more convenient at that location than in Kankakee, Pyatt, or Macon. That's just my opinion. Number 3 is, proposed conforms to the applicable regulations, standards, et cetera. And I think that's pretty well documented. So the real question is number 2. If we're talking about the public welfare, you can have a conversation in terms of incarceration in the United States. There are things that we are mandated to do. I mean, as the sheriff talked about, he's given inmates. I mean, that's not going to stop anytime in the near future. The question is what happens to the life of that inmate? How are they treated? What is happening in the facility that they are living? What kind of access to resources are they given? And I think that, at least in my opinion, what has been outlined here significantly increases that lived experience in the jail. Because they're adding in the single occupancy, they're adding in more medical facilities, they're adding in more programming rooms, and I think if we want to look at it from that perspective of public welfare and in terms of the inmate's life while they're there, is this going to improve that? So I'm going to leave city council members with that.
All right, J.F.?
I think we got stuck on the same point for good reason, right? So, having that reminder that this is about the special use permit. And so looking at that second criteria is kind of where I got focused in on as well, because I think it's the relevant salient piece. Looking at the memo from Dave Westner as well, in terms of the definition of the public welfare in the memo, he says, this part of the criteria looks at the impact on the general public at large, or those that may generally be in the area of use. I find that the argument that this is not injurious to the public welfare is concerning to me, personally. I hear that I think there are a lot of really good things about this proposal. I think there's no question that the downtown jail has to be closed. I think there's no question that some of the things that are in this proposal would be beneficial to the folks who are incarcerated. But I think that there are unanswered questions that are related to this general understanding of welfare. Increasing the capacity of incarceration or moving it without addressing many of the alternatives to incarceration recommended by the Champaign County Community Justice Task Force or the Champaign County Racial Justice Task Force, to me seems unreasonably injurious to the public welfare. And our residents have shown that they feel similarly. In 2016, when a tax increase was put forward as a referendum, 70% of voters rejected that tax increase. So looking at it from that perspective of what is good for our community and what has our community already said, and it may seem trivial, but the loss of a soccer field is not trivial for folks who do not have access to other public recreation. So to me, that second standard, I think that it is injurious to the public welfare, and I have concerns that there was not enough opportunity for public input to prove otherwise. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't see it actually demonstrated. I will say as a county resident, I don't think that there was enough of a conversation about that. I find that very disappointing as a voter, but that's not how I'm making my judgment. I'm making my opinion based off of the criteria of the special use permit, and in my opinion, this is injurious to the public welfare.
Chris?
One of the criteria, as Alderperson Wu eloquently said, is for that the proposed use is not injurious to the public welfare. I submit tonight that the expanding of the satellite jail for $20 million is injurious to the public welfare. On behalf of those who have committed suicide in our county jail, Joe Beavers, Marcus Edwards, Terrell Layfield, Jesse Massingale, I say a jail is injurious to the public welfare. On behalf of those who have died of drug complications while in the county jail, Quentin Larry, Paul Clifton, Veronica Horsted, Melissa Lackey, Toya Frazier, and Janet Hahn, I say a jail is injurious to the public welfare. On behalf of everyone who ever lost their job, their home, their kids, their spouse, their friends, their car, their reputation, their minds, or nearly their life from drug withdrawal, all because they were in the county jail for too long, not able to make bond, I say a jail is injurious to the public welfare. And for all of us who are denied the use of 20 million tax dollars to buy rent subsidies, educational scholarships, workforce job training, trade school tuitions, small business loans and grants, mental health treatments, substance abuse recovery, first-time home buys, single-room occupancy housing, real economic development where it's needed, and whatever else actually reduces crime, I say a jail is injurious to the public welfare. For far too long, the jailing of most people in this county has been a way to make money. For far too long, the taxpayers have had to pay and pay for the extraordinary taxing and spending on criminal justice buildings and the never-ending growth of big government. We will continue to pay for the 2,000 courthouse expansion until the year 2029, with all the millions upon millions of finance fees that come with it. Every year, Champaign County spends well over 70 million tax dollars a year on the criminal justice system. This county's priorities are questionable. It would rather spend 20 million tax dollars on a jail than build a grocery store where it's needed. As it is, this jail proposal robs the Park District of soccer fields for youth programming. The public has long wanted an investment in their community, but are told year after year there's no tax money for that. The public wants jailing to be used only as a last resort, for only the most violent. We can try to make do with the satellite jail. We have a Pretrial Fairness Act coming up January 23rd. Counting the current roster of inmates, it was determined that 23% of the inmates could be let go under that act. And that's all we've ever asked. Instead of more jail, how about less crime and less inmates? I vote no to this special use permit. Thank you for listening.
Anybody else wish to speak? Mary Alice, would you take the chair?
Sure, I'll take the chair. The chair recognizes James.
Thank you. I've been a part of this conversation since I joined the county board in 2010. I've been to multiple meetings that were standing room only, many of which Chris was at, through several task forces, through several evaluations. And I have to thank Kyle for his note today, which hit all of the points exactly where they needed to be hit. I want to thank Stephanie for calling out the 2 bullet points that I was going to read if she hadn't already read them, which basically says in 2013, we knew that the downtown facility was insufficient for its purpose as a jail. In fact, it was horrendous. Directly, we learned in 2011 from a national review that was the case. We also knew from this person that a lot of people like to quote, Dr. Kalmanoff. Probably a lot of people that didn't actually meet him and work with him. He was a unique individual, a lawyer, a master of social work, a PhD, who really listened to all the voices that were part of that conversation then and drove some of the additional task force that the county did afterwards, that essentially the costs of the jail, the facilities were a distraction. The cost of the jail was running 2 of them, 365 days a year, staffing 2 facilities that are open all the time and have to be staffed all the time. That was bleeding away funds year after year that could be redirected to programs. And so now we're talking about, we're in a situation, fortunately, over the years, because of discussions like this, because of pressure like this, because of people looking at it, the jail population has been driven down year after year. We have some things in Champaign County that are done here to keep people out of jail. It's not as successful as any of us would like it to be, but we have things in Champaign County that work to keep people out of jail that other counties would love to have. That would, we have arraignment 7 days a week. People do not wait in jail for arraignment. There's been a lot of effort put into this. The bottom line is we're going to continue to have the care of people that are remanded to our sheriff's care, and right now we can't do it right. We are, in my mind, harming the public trust with the situation that we have. Every time there's a proposal to do this, and I've seen, what was it, $47 million, Chris? That there were proposals that were out of this world for what to do, and I think there was a $20 million proposal 7 years ago, which means that 7 years ago it was probably more like $12 million, is what you would have gotten for that. No, this is something that needs to be acted on, and continuing to kick the can down the road, as I've heard individuals say in the past, is not addressing that second item in approving a special use permit. Right now, what we're doing is insufficient to take care of the individuals that are put in the custody of the sheriff beyond his control, and beyond many things of this are very frustrating, like the state agencies that are supposed to cooperate with us and take people out of the jail do not do so in a timely fashion. But I am supporting this because I have seen the last 13 years of public engagement in this, and how many people have come to the county board, and how many people have come to those task force and put their feedback into it. We have heard these concerns. It's not one soccer field. That's not what this is about. It's not one soccer field. I'd hate to get rid of a soccer field if we didn't need to, but it's an extra soccer field. It's one soccer field. It's not, it's very frustrating. We've had, I'd say, probably 45 county board members in the last 13 years who have spent time and effort as elected officials, some of whom are elected to represent us, represent the people of Urbana, to work on these issues. They've dug into this, and they've got a plan, and they've got a program that they can actually execute on now. And that's why I'm going to support this. And when you tell yourself that you're voting no because of what a jail does to the public good, that's not what you're doing here. What you're doing here is you're voting no to continue the current situation, which has medical need inmates in what I think are intake rooms. Is that still the case, Sheriff, that the intake rooms, the booking rooms, because they have outlets, that's where they're at. There's no negative pressure there. It's just, it was an interview room for intake that there's 8 or 9 of them. I've been in these places. I understand why the downtown jail has no value or future for helping us. It's not only that it's falling down. It's not only that it costs a lot to run a second jail. It is also dangerous for both inmates and staff because it was designed to standards that were common in the 60s. And we talk about these things like direct supervision. That's the model of design here. That allows both an efficient operation of the jail and a way for it to be safe for the inmates and safe for the staff. These things are all positive direction. If it was about expanding the jail capacity in this community, I would not be supporting it. We don't need an expanded jail. We need a smaller jail with the right capabilities that keeps men and women segregated, that keeps mental health patients segregated, that keeps people who need health care segregated, that helps with some of the interpersonal conflicts that make some inmates dangerous to other inmates. We need that. And if you're voting no because you think there's problems with the criminal justice system in this country, there is, and there are issues. But when you vote no against this, you're maintaining a space that keeps those inmates in that kind of place, or has us paying $2 million a year to house them somewhere else, and you're just making it somebody else's jail expansion problem, not Champaign County's. And those $2 million a year, when you ask where the money for programs is, that's $20 million in 10 years. We put $20 million in this expansion now, it'll be good for 25, 30 years. How does that pan out from a financial standpoint? Thank you.
Shall I
I will take the chair back.
All right, I relinquish the chair. I just want to say something.
Therese.
Okay, I don't know. I'm kind of torn. I'm trying to think about, this is what I think about. I think about when I toured the jail, with the understanding that jail is not prison. Jail is jail, meaning people are held there over for trial or appeal, or they have a short sentence. They're not going to prison for something violent, because that's what prison is. There is a difference. What I don't want is to see the people that have been put in those situations come out of that even more angry than they were before they went in. And it seems like we have a county that talks out of both sides of its neck. You don't want jails. You don't want crime. Well, we have no control over people who commit crime. We have no control over people that make bad judgments, or that are mentally ill, or that may have other issues that may have put them in that situation. But we do have some control over making sure that those people have the space to not have to endure a particular punishment. It is difficult. That tour changed my mind about a lot of things. But the one thing that bothered me the most was seeing so many young people, young black men, in such closed quarters. And everyone, and no place for women. I mean, there were maybe 5 women, but it's like they have to, it's like putting a sheet up between here and there for them to have their privacy. And that bothered me. And everyone, if you want these programs and you want this rehabilitation and you want folks to have the opportunity to reset their minds when they get out, they have to have space. Everyone has to have that, mentally ill or not. And it is not my place to say, oh, I don't want jail, because next week you just might need one. Everybody needs someplace for folks to be when they do something harmful to someone else. Because you don't want them living next door. You've made that plain and clear. There's such a NIMBYism here. It just bothers me to death. The county jail is under a legislative mandate to not make it, cruel and unusual to serve time in jail. And crowding people together is cruel. So I will be voting for this expansion because I want folks to have the opportunity to change their mindset, get their heads together, have mental health help when they need it, or medical help when they need it, because there's a space for that to happen. That's my comment.
Thank you, Sharice. Mary Alice?
Yeah, I just want to make one final comment here, and I realize that I'm not going to change Councilman Evans' mind or perhaps other people's mind, but I do want to say this. I think that we have a responsibility to ensure that people that we are incarcerating are living in a correct environment, and Councilwoman Hersey said it much nicer than I did. What I'm trying to get at here is, I hear that we spend a lot of money on incarceration. I hear that we spend a lot of money on public safety and police and the sheriff and so forth. But my question is there a time that we should spend money? Shouldn't we improve the living conditions? Shouldn't we be willing to spend money to make sure that the lives of those people we are incarcerating actually have a higher quality of life? Isn't that a good time to spend money? I don't think the idea of saying, well, we shouldn't be spending this money, it goes counter to actually providing a humane incarceration option. And so that, I get that there's a lot of disagreement in terms of who we should incarcerate and when we should incarcerate and how can we prevent these and so forth. And I agree those conversations should happen. And I agree that we should change something in this country. But at the moment, this is what we're stuck with. This is the system that we have in place. We have rules that we have to adhere to. We have laws that we have to adhere to. We are going to be, the county is going to be responsible for how those people are treated. And if they are not able to build a facility to make that better, then what are we saying about the people that are being incarcerated? That they deserve that kind of life? So I reject the option that nobody spend any additional money just to make the quality of life better. I think it's the wrong argument.
Chandra?
This is another heavy vote. Unfortunately, I understand that there will always be people who do bad things. So unfortunately, there will always be a need for a jail. I understand that the downtown jail is unusable. What I'm appalled at is that the downtown jail condition got to where it is, that the upkeep was negligent, that there was negligence in the upkeep, and we've gotten to the point where $20 million on an expansion is necessary. I hate that a soccer field has to be taken away. However, I do appreciate all the efforts that went into the plan to address, mental health needs, physical needs, programming for life after incarceration. I think those are all very important. And I've tried to very much focus my my processing of this around the special use permit and the three things that the three bullet points of the special use permit. And I've taken into consideration all the emails that I've gotten, the phone calls, the in-person stop-bys I've gotten, and taking all of that in. And I do think that the public has sort of a skewed idea of what is happening, which is why I was such a proponent of allowing more time for the county to explain what they're doing, show this diagram, explain how life would be better for those incarcerated. So it is a difficult decision, and I hope that when I vote for this, that those on either side understand my choice, and that I did hear them, and that I've taken it all under consideration. And like Mary Alice said, this is the choice these are the facts and the choices that we're giving. I would very much not like to see an expansion of the jail. I don't want to see more beds built. I'd rather see them just renovate the Satellite Jail to make less cells and more mental health space and whatever. But this is the choice that we're given. And so I just hope that moving forward that when we advertise meetings, public hearings, I've said this before, that it's a more robust advertising, because I think it's important that people understand what we're doing here and why we're doing it.
Thank you, Chandra. Jaya?
Thank you. I think we've heard a lot of good feedback on why this is so complicated of a topic, but I feel like it is important to restate in terms of what does it mean to vote no, right? I have a problem with someone else defining what my no vote would mean. What I'm saying from what I have been presented is that our community was not giving adequate opportunity at this time. I'm not talking about 13 years ago, I'm not talking about 10 years ago, I'm talking about now, to weigh in not only on the construction of this facility, but the use of ARPA money related to it. So while again, I think there are a lot of really strong aspects to this proposal, I don't know what other possibilities were out there. I don't know who was at the table for these conversations other than a small group of county board members. So while I respect all of my fellow council members and however they vote tonight, I do object to someone else defining what my no would mean if I vote no. So I think it's important again to recognize that nuance, recognize that there are things here that are progress, right? That I'm very glad to see some of the medical and mental health concerns being addressed, but there also hasn't been an adequate conversation about the impact on our community. And that's what a no vote would mean for me.
Grace?
Thank you. I've already made most of my points, so I won't repeat or reiterate them. I just wanted to say, in addition to that I would like to be able to support this, but as I've said, it's about the amount of information and public input. I see a lot of the positives, and I wish that we had more opportunity to address those misconceptions with the public. And if they've already been addressed, then make that clear that it's already been addressed, saying that we've already talked to inmates and gotten this feedback, and that's why we've included this. I think that those things need to be addressed and give people the opportunity for meaningful input if anything hasn't already been considered. Because I think it can be injurious to the public welfare for people to feel excluded and not aware of such a big thing. I think when bulldozers and cranes start showing up and people notice it, and they might not be involved in this process, I think that there's going to be a lot of, if you want to talk about public mistrust, I think that's a big issue. And I think this is a really big, complicated project that's going to take, it's been over a decade in the planning so far. It's going to take years more to build. I don't think it's unreasonable to take a few weeks to better inform the public and the people of Urbana about this special use permit. So again, I feel like we haven't done our due diligence on this. It's something I would like to support. I see the positives, and I don't think that our current solution is working, but I don't feel comfortable with it at this point. I think there's the impact on the community as a whole, and then the impact on people there and their families, and I think that we need a little more information and communication on this. So again, I would like to support it, but I don't feel comfortable at this point. And I don't know if I can sneak in a last question for staff maybe, but I guess point of process question. If something were hypothetically denied a special use permit, can the applicant reapply, or is that kind of closed, or is there a certain amount of ways the application would have to change to be resubmitted?
I'll need to look that up. I think they would be able to reapply, but let me make sure before I give you a definitive answer.
And again, the motivation for my question and my no vote being that I think we need a little more time, a little more information, and a little more public input. So again, I don't think that just rejecting this permit altogether is the positive outcome that I would like to see. But I also can't just rubber stamp and trust these things that I don't fully understand yet at this point with making a determination whether it's injurious to public welfare.
Mary Alice?
Can I ask a question of Jaya, Chandra, and Grace are the three that have been talking about public input. What does that mean? Are we talking about having, I mean, that there's so many different forms of public input. I don't quite, and I've heard different ideas of what that might be, but so I don't understand. Grace, you had said a couple of weeks for more public input. Does that mean a presentation at city council where people could, or are you talking about the county board? I'd just like some clarification on that.
Yes, good question. I don't have, an exact idea laid out. I do have some ideas. What I think would be helpful would be more information provided to us in writing that goes in the packet about some of the great things that have been addressed verbally tonight or that have been emailed to us but haven't been included in the whole conceptual overview of what this expansion, and I think even just changing the word to consolidation would make a big difference in public viewpoint. So I think that stuff like that would be important. I think town halls that one of our county board members here recommended would be helpful, a chance to have a presentation to explain to the public and have some facilitated public feedback that could be in person and remotely, maybe even more importantly, having a Zoom remote option. Those were the kinds of things that I would like to see to feel that there's been input, and especially from Urbana citizens. I think no input at Plan Commission I find more disturbing than reassuring, because I have heard from multiple members of the public who have cared and been tracking this issue for some time to some extent. And we heard from one tonight who said they felt alienated from this process. And so I'd like more information about what the county has already done in that process. And I would like more input from Urbana residents about this special use permit in particular.
So I see nothing specific in the zoning ordinance that says anything about reapplication. I guess my question would be, so if it's denied, what would the new application do differently? I mean, they have plans here for this specific thing, so I'm not sure what reapplying would do. I'd also just strongly urge that if council does deny this, that you are very articulate in your reasons for denial. Because, simply losing a soccer field, I don't think is a strong reason for denying something like this. So please, if you deny it, be very measured in your reasons for denial.
Chris?
City Clerk, could you maybe clarify? My understanding was that if this was denied, that the quote-unquote winning side, the 4 no's, any of those people could bring it back, and with the understanding that if you bring it back, you're changing your vote. Okay, but it just takes one person to do that, right? Or one council person.
You mean to change their vote? Is that
Well,
what you're
I mean,
saying?
one person to motion to bring it back to the council with the understanding that you're bringing it back because you're going to change your vote. In other words, we're not just going to have a re-vote of a no,
Yeah. One of you can, whomever it is that made the motion will have to be the one to bring it back, and it would have to be with the approval of the others who voted against it.
Okay.
So, yeah, if I could get a little more clarification. Usually a motion to reconsider has a term in which it can be
Yes,
done.
it would have to come
For example,
back.
like Congress, it's the session of Congress, a
Mhm.
motion can be reconsidered, but in a body like this, I don't think once the meeting's over, a motion
It's
to
the
reconsider.
same meeting.
Yeah.
It's within the same meeting.
Yes.
No, if we end this committee of the whole meeting with it failing, that meeting is over. We can't go to the county or the city council meeting or a following COW meeting and move to reconsider because that session has ended.
That's what I'm saying. The motion to reconsider has to be within this
Okay,
meeting.
thank you.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
So the motion to reconsider, Chris, is only valid until we go home tonight. And it has to be, like you said, it has to be brought by by a person who was in the prevailing side, but it does not designate how they vote. They can move to reconsider and vote the same way the second time.
Yeah.
They can. They can fail again. Yeah, go ahead, Diane.
I would like to ask permission to speak. I don't vote on this issue, but I would like an opportunity to speak.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. And this is for the public as much as for this council, but what we have before us tonight, I want to remind everybody, is an application for a special use permit. That's what you had in front of you. This is narrowly defined. There are 3 criteria that you are able to consider in your deliberations. You've chosen to interpret one of the criteria in a very broad way that has turned this from a special use permit over a specific application to a policy decision being made here at the Urbana City Council on behalf of the Champaign County Board. It is a special use permit. The policy decision, the decision to close the downtown jail, consolidate the facilities into the satellite jail, to make it the size that it is with the programs and services that it is a policy decision that rightly and wisely was made by the Champaign County Board. And I've watched these deliberations for years. I've been in this town long enough to remember what the block of downtown Urbana looked like before there was a jail or a county plaza. But I digress. The Champaign County Board is a duly elected body by the citizens of Champaign County. Urbana residents have representatives on that board. They voted to support the policy. All but one member of the Champaign County Board voted to support this proposal, which is a miracle in itself. And that's a testament to the hard work of the current leadership in the county. You have representatives on that board. Every single resident in Urbana has an elected representative on the Champaign County Board who did their due diligence, who listened to the public, who studied the issue, who held public sessions, who debated this in public. And you, as a board here, represent 38,336 people. Our county is 210,000 people. You were not elected by that entire population. And you don't, in this role, your role tonight is to focus on the special use permit and the 3 criteria. It is not to make this policy decision on behalf of the entire Champaign County population. That's what we have before us. A no vote is basically usurping the authority of the Champaign County Board to make that decision. And that's their job. Their job is to run the jail, to operate the jail on behalf of the citizens of the county. So I encourage you, look at the criteria, think of the consequences. One of the consequences is a court could be asked to decide for you. That's not out of the range of possibility. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Diane. I don't see any other hands up. That would mean that it's time to vote, and I'm going to ask the clerk to call the roll because I think it's going to be close.
Ms. Wu?
Yes.
Mr. Evans?
No.
Ms. Hersey?
Yes.
Ms. Colacetti?
No.
Ms. Bishop?
Yes.
Ms. Wilkin?
No.
Mr. Quisenberry?
Yes, that motion passes to City Council without recommendation. Our next agenda item is ordinance number 2022-06023, an ordinance amending City Code Chapter 3, liquor. And somebody's going to present on this.
Yes.
Do we need a short recess? Okay, I'm going to ask for a 5-minute recess. Is that okay? We will recess for 5 minutes. All right, I'll call us back to order. Do we need a roll to prove everybody's here? Okay, good. What are we doing to the code here?
I'm going to introduce this, and then I'll turn it over to Kate. So just a way of introduction, if you recall, in February of 2020, the Urbana City Council passed a complete rewrite of Chapter 3, which is the Urbana Liquor Code. So tonight we're bringing you a few revisions to the Urbana City Code for several reasons. One is that we need to update it to comply with changes that have been made recently in the state liquor code. A couple of the revisions are to make this consistent with the liquor code in the city of Champaign, so that makes it easier for enforcement and just for the public in general to understand. And then there's an additional measure that would improve giving us another measure to help protect private and public property in the city. And then there's some cleanup in terms of some typos we found, despite, having proofread that code 57 times, and some areas where we didn't catch the changes to the gender neutral language. So general cleanup, but in general, there's just a few revisions. The entire code was rewritten a couple of years ago. And I'll turn it over to Kate. And I'm in this capacity, the mayor of Urbana and Champaign, for that matter, also serves as the local liquor control commissioner. So we are in charge of administering and making sure we comply with state liquor law and also with our own local code. And Kate Levy is the deputy local liquor control commissioner, and she is responsible for the daily administration of our code, as well as in the past month, overseeing the annual renewal of liquor licenses. So it's been a very, very intense month for many reasons. Take it away, Kate.
Great, thank you. As the mayor stated, we've been spending the last few months revising our rewrite. I did distribute a memo and a red line copy on the 20th of June. The only thing that's changed since then is we have added section 3.65, which will be on the last page of your memo, and that's a duty to report disturbances. And we changed section 3-2, the temporary emergency suspension time frame, which I'll go over. So we just finished renewals for the year. We have a total of 75 current liquor license holders. This is kind of a breakdown of who they are and what the classifications stand for. So briefly to go through, and everything is outlined specifically in the memo, and you can see the red line, everything is marked up for your 47 pages of reading pleasure. So what we've started with, new terminology that was added. These specific terms are for the new additions in our code for delivery and packaged liquor, delivery, third-party delivery, and the sale of cocktails to go. As I mentioned, we changed the temporary emergency suspension. The time of that was set at 24 hours originally. And now we're proposing that it changes to 7 business days. And we do that, or we have done that, because recently we've encountered some issues where when things need to be acted on, especially in this last month, as we've been busy with renewals and everything else that's going on in the city, it's very hard to get together with the attorney and write an order to do a suspension, and then have to continually, now here's another 24-hour suspension, here's another 24-hour suspension. So this just builds in time for us in order to potentially potentially hold a hearing or issue a suspension or revocation of the license, whatever may be called for. Next addition, the hours of operation specific to packaged liquor sales. Currently in our code, packaged liquor sales, like at your gas stations, grocery stores, they coincide with our regular bars, taverns, restaurants. You can sell from 6 a.m. in the morning until 2 a.m. in the morning. Champaign has capped their packaged liquor sales for your gas stations and grocery stores and liquor stores at midnight. And that's what we're hoping to do to coincide with them, because we have recently had issues where services are discontinued in Champaign, and that crowd of people now is coming to Urbana, and we've had some incidents with parking lot gatherings and things like that. So we're just trying to get a handle on that. The applicant requirement to be age 21 or older, that was never something that was in the code, but it makes absolute sense since you're not allowed to drink or consume alcohol or purchase alcohol. So if you're operating an establishment, it makes sense that you should also be of age to do so. Now we get to the completely new additions to the code. Video gaming fees. A few years back when I first came to the city, at renewal time, the video gaming terminal operators, so those are the companies that are kind of leasing the terminals to the establishments, they would come in and pay the fees for the terminals on behalf of the liquor licensee. Then the gaming board stepped in while we were revising the code and indicated that they were no longer allowed to do that because that would be considered sort of a bribe. Now the rules have changed again, December 17th of last year, and the municipal fees can be split between the terminal operators and the establishment. We did speak with someone at the Illinois Gaming Board recently and trying to figure out the logistics of how this could be accomplished, and they suggested that we write that language into our city code, and so that's what you have here. We're just complying with what the state is authorizing. And next is deliveries. So State Liquor Control Act was updated to permit the licensees to do delivery if you had specific licenses for off-premise or a combination on and off. And the only licensees that we have for those classifications are Class P, that's your packaged liquor store, and that's your microbrewery. This applies to also third-party services are allowed to deliver for those two types of establishments under the state law right now. We do have a packaged liquor rider, and if a Class A, which is our regular tavern, or a restaurant and tavern licensee applied for that packaged liquor rider, they could also deliver and have third-party services deliver packaged liquor. That is different than cocktails to go. Once again, this is something that, and also with the delivery, this came out of the governor's emergency orders during COVID when he was making allowances for different establishments to be versatile in the businesses that they were conducting. And the cocktails to go were put into effect for our local restaurants and taverns. We did an emergency order reflecting that. The city of Champaign did an emergency order reflecting that. Since then, the state has continued to extend their emergency order, which is to sunset sometime in 2024. And in the meantime, City of Champaign has written it into their city code to sunset whenever the state decides to sunset or extend. And so we just mimic that language and put that in our code too. And then the last thing we added was this last section. Let me just get the designation again.
3-65.
3-65, duty to report disturbances and maintain the premises and adjacent areas. And this new addition was born out of issues that have taken place in the last year, and the putting the onus on the liquor license holder to make report when there is something going on at their establishment or in their surrounding area that shouldn't be happening. The maintain the premises and adjacent area, that's mostly dealing with trash, debris, open containers leaving premises, junk showing up in the parking deck because people have been able to walk through with a liquor bottle, and this has caused extra time for our police force and for our public works department. So we put that in as well. And I believe our last page of the memo, your options are to approve replacing the language of Chapter 3 with the proposed language attached, reject replacing the language, or make selective edits as you deem appropriate. So that ends my presentation. If anyone has any specific questions related
Questions,
to this.
Mary Alice.
Well, I originally had 3 questions, but you already answered one of mine. So I have a nitpicky question, which is on page 42 under section 3-63A. I'm just curious how we came up with the 12 hours from time that the alcohol liquor leaves the licensed premises.
I believe this is Dave Westner copied this from the state requirement, and this is what the city of Champaign also is requiring.
Okay. And then, is there any intersection, this new section 3-65? I'm trying to figure out how that intersects with the cocktails to go. So it might not at all, but if section B says any property used in association with their premises and adjacent areas of the premises, free from liquor bottles, et cetera, et cetera. So if you have cocktails to go and, say a group of people decide to go down Goose Alley or whatever and drink it, is it the responsibility of the people who sold them the cocktails to go clean up that area if those people left? Does that make sense?
Right, I understand what you're saying. The idea of cocktail to go, though, we do not have an open container law in Urbana, so you can't take your cocktail and go walking around. So there's that part. So they would be, those persons would be responsible for walking then through the city right-of-way with those things. We're talking more like establishments that have maybe outdoor cafe permits where they extend onto their, onto the city right-of-way and don't control the overflow of trash or what their customers are doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I just wanted to, I can see somebody having a cup with their logo on it, Bunnies, for example. I don't know if they have one. And, people pick up the cocktails to go and they go down, walk around. They're not supposed to be drinking, but of course, they've got it in their hand. They're probably going to be drinking. They leave a Bunnies thing 2 blocks away. It's not Bunny's responsibility.
Right, so the cocktails to go, if you're selling cocktails to go, you're required to have a tamper-proof.
Right.
You're not allowed to be consuming. So
I know, but the person could be consuming it once they
And then it would be the person that would be penalized. It would not be Bunnies because
Okay.
it can't leave their establishment without being
just confirming.
sealed. Correct. Yeah.
This is designed to more address larger gatherings, 100 or 200 people who have left an establishment or are on the adjacent sidewalks or the parking garage or something like that and trash the premises, which has also happened. So,
All right, other questions? Grace?
Thank you. I won't repeat the same question, but to say that I also had some questions and concerns about the adjacent areas thing, which I think I understand and makes sense. I was wondering about if you could explain the temporary emergency suspension. Is that for like if someone's doing a street festival and they have some kind of exemption, or what does that entail?
No, the temporary emergency suspension, that is when somebody is violating the requirements of their liquor license, and the local liquor commissioner, we just, with sometimes the advice of Public Works Department or the Building Safety Division or the Fire Department or whoever, if we deem that they're a public nuisance and we need to suspend them so that we can investigate and bring them in to have a conversation with them, that's the point of the temporary suspension.
I see. Thank you. So the suspension of their license for now up to 7 days.
Correct.
Maximum, right?
Correct. So I will say recently we had an issue and we had to serve a suspension 3 consecutive days. So I had to write up the notice 3 days and then get the police department every day to go out and do the new one because we needed that time to gather information, set the meeting, all those things. This is just to give us an extra amount of time to process all that work because it nearly killed me.
well, and ultimately, a license doesn't get suspended or revoked without a hearing. So this would give us a few extra days for people to prepare to hold that hearing rather than to have consecutive 24-hour suspensions delivered.
Thank you. And a few more here. With the gaming terminal, could you explain the terminal operator versus licensee? Like I imagine one is like the shop or the bar or the gaming physical place, and then one
Right.
is who owns the gaming things themselves.
Correct. So the a terminal operator, that word operator is the company like Midwest Gaming that loans out the pieces of equipment to an establishment. So this gives them the opportunity then to pay for part of the fees for each of those video gaming terminals, which are right now they're listed at $1,080. So this year what we did, we sent invoicing to all of those operator companies. They sent us their listing of who they service, and they paid for. I had one company paid for 52 gaming terminals. So they wrote the check for all of those. And what they'll do with the liquor license holders, they will take half of the money back from the profits from those terminals then.
Okay, and so it sounds like usually worked out then between the licensee and the terminal operator,
Mhm.
and it's the same payment to the city. We're just saying whoever
Correct.
pays what fraction of it we can accept.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. And then last one was about the time of stopping alcohol sales at midnight, which you said was for packaged pickup, like grocery
packaged
stores,
liquor.
gas
Mhm.
stations, and things. So the bars and taverns would still be able to serve until 2 a.m., is that right?
Right, so that's for the consumption on site. This is just for the packaged liquor to leave an establishment. That would be cut at midnight.
And then what about the delivery?
Delivery is midnight as well.
Okay. And
Yeah.
then
You
also-
can't, any of the establishments, and I know it's written in here, that you're not allowed to deliver outside of the parameters of your license hours. So your delivery would have to match the packaged liquor midnight cutoff.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that was my next question, was wondering about how that fit in with the at least 12 hours to deliver. Like if you could say you bought it at 10 p.m., but
I
we
know.
delivered it at 4 a.m.
Mhm.
But you're saying that they can only deliver within
Until midnight.
that time as well.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that was all my questions. Thank you.
Gio?
Yeah, thanks. I have just a couple questions. With that new section regarding damage to property and things like that, is there any consideration of, if there is a big party and they get kicked out, right, because they're being disruptive and then decide to trash things outside, is the bar then still responsible for that damage?
So I'm trying to imagine what it is you're trying to ask.
So kind of like if it was retaliatory, right? So like there's a group of people causing a problem within a bar staff are like, hey, you're causing trouble, you gotta go. They go outside and they're upset
Then they're
about it.
trespassing. If they've been
So-
asked to leave the premises, they're trespassing, and then the police would be ticketing
The
those.
individual,
those-
so it would not be on the
Correct.
business for
Correct.
any, okay, that's helpful clarification, thank you.
Yeah.
The other question I had, and I know this came up ages ago when we were talking about packaged liquor, are we aware of any increase in instance related to folks drinking and driving or underage alcohol consumption? Because I know that was a question that, because it's so new, but it wasn't clear if there'd been any kind of.
Are you referring to the cocktails
Sorry,
to go?
it's the cocktails to go. Wrong terminology.
I'm glad you asked, because I thought of that. I thought somebody's going to ask me, so I sat down with the police chief today and asked him that very thing. And he said he is unaware of any issues related to this program, nor is he aware of any issues related to Champagne's program. So there hasn't been any uptick. And as a matter of fact, as far as I know, there's only 2 restaurants and taverns, 3 that possibly even participated in the cocktails to go during COVID. I don't even know if one of them remains doing that. So, but yeah, we never heard a thing from anyone, any negative feedback, and the police didn't have an issue with it either. But I always, and I've talked with Diane and Carol about this before, I always try to reconcile the idea of it's your decision whether you're going to get that cocktail to go and have it in your car and start drinking it, or buying a 6-pack at Schnucks and getting into the car and opening it up and starting to drink it. So the same kind of parameters are in place. It's not legal to drink and drive.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's what one would hope, but it was new, so I was curious.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. If there aren't any more questions, can I have a motion?
I'd like to move for us to pass ordinance, to vote for approval for ordinance number 2022-06-023, and ordinance amending City Code, Chapter 3, Liquor Exact. And for a move to approval, for our city council.
On consent? All right. Okay. Sure.
I'll second it.
Second by Mary Alice. Further discussion? Chris?
Just a quick thank you to the mayor and executive staff and everybody to jump on this and take care of it. There's been some issues in my ward, won't say who or what, but just want to thank you for taking care of it.
Yes, Grace?
Thanks. I also want to add some appreciation for the change in gender-neutral language. I think that's a great example of when we're revamping something of making those changes as we're making other changes. So I appreciate that. Thank you to our liquor commissioner and executive liquor commissioner. Is that how this works? Deputy. Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. It's strange because when we first rewrote the code, we thought we had done that. We thought we had hit everything. And then as I was going through this spring, I thought, and there's another one, and there's another one. So it just takes a lot of eyes and patience on these things. So we'll get them done. It's a good thing I like city code, so maybe I'll work on some more.
All right. Seeing no further discussion, would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Wu?
Yes.
Mr. Evans?
Yes.
Ms. Hersey?
Yes.
Ms. Colacetti?
Yes.
Ms. Bishop?
Yeah.
Ms. Wilkin?
Yes.
Mr. Quisenberry?
Yes, that passes unanimously, and that is the end of our items, except for council input and communications. Who would like to go first? Grace?
Thanks. Just two quick things I was hoping to have updates on. I'm never sure if it's appropriate to ask in the staff report or just bring it up at council input, so I'll just throw it out here since I didn't mention it or ask earlier. I was just hoping that we could have a little update on the resolution about budget allowances versus not after the budget conversation. I know with OMA and constraints and stuff that, we can only have a certain number of council members at a time. People looking at me confused. The budget talk about the resolution for allowances for what technology or programs or whatnot we're having with police. Yes, an email it was just asking input, or you said you got it covered?
I had sent out an email today asking, we'd like to put this on as a discussion item for next Monday, the 11th. And so I knew that at least Chris had a list. And so if anybody had any additional details that they wanted to share so that we could be prepared. So that's the status, is it'll be on as a discussion item on Monday, but ask if you have any additional information, detail that you would like us to be aware of so that we understand fully what you intend so that we can respond to that.
And so then you're saying that you all as executive branch would be drafting the resolution, I guess is the question. Or
Yes, and I feel at the
needed.
moment that we don't know enough and we'd like to have a discussion so that we can maybe get closer to the same page before we put pen to paper.
Okay, thank you. Makes sense. Just wondering what still needs to be done, what I need to do, or just sit back and wait. And then also, if we had any updates on a discussion about hybrid meetings, I would still appreciate that, looking at the legal logistics and expenses and other emotional or other aspects of that. I think that would still be a productive discussion as well.
Thank you, Grace. Any others? Chandra?
I think tonight's conversation around the jail stuff highlighted the importance of staying connected, speaking to the public to all levels of government, because decisions are being made that have impacts on our community. And I'm going to do my best to ensure that I'm pushing out information about what's happening in our meetings so that the public has the opportunity to give input in a timely fashion. And I'm also hoping that the city also starts to modify the way that they're advertising their public hearings in a more mainstream fashion. And of course, as always, my email, my phone is open to receive input and communications from residents. So I just want to, make sure that the public understands that, things happen at city council, but things are also happening on the county level, and they need to, make sure that they're tuning into both levels of government.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing no one else, we have come to the end of our agenda, so this meeting is adjourned.